Good morning, everybody. Welcome back. How many of you have heard about the French Foreign Legion? Now, second question. How many of you, even though you know what the French Foreign Legion is, or I should say what it stands for, really have no idea what they do and the individuals that encompass the French Foreign Legion? I fall into the latter category. I knew what the acronym was. I understood it had something to do with the French military, but I really didn't know anything about the individuals that comprise it. The beauty of the internet that allows people to reach out. My guest today is Joel Struthers. He is the author of the book Appel, which chronicles his experience in the French Foreign Legion. He's Canadian, probably French-Canadian. He speaks a little parlez-vous français, if you will. And more importantly than all of this, he's now a helicopter pilot, which anybody following kind of my journey through aviation knows. That's probably what I really wanted to talk about, and we talked about it a good amount. But what a cool way to understand why somebody would want to join the Foreign Legion, what they do, what the process entails. Once you make it through selection, what are you able to do? What are you expected to do? What does your life look like? What are the benefits of serving in the Foreign Legion? Really cool. First person I've ever actually sat down with individual firsthand experience in the Foreign Legion. So that will be my guest today. Before we get to my guest, stay with me. Give me 90 seconds. Let's pay the bills. Let's keep bringing the podcast to everybody for free. Thank you. Today's episode is brought to you by Black Rifle Coffee. We're diving straight into the website right now. For those of you who are listening, you can just listen and follow along. For those of you on a video format, you can see what I'm looking at. Focusing on their D2C, direct-to-consumer offerings. Looks like there's a Valentine's Day sale, which should be ended because this is the end of February, but hey, maybe it's still going on. And then there's a 30% off President's Day steal instead of sale. I see what they did there. You can shop coffee, you can shop apparel, you can shop gear, and you can shop energy. Now, energy over here on the right is the newest of offerings, but I've covered that twice. Let's go back over here to shop coffee and just see where this takes us. You can look at their roasts. All right, this is scrolling us through, and this is, again, depending on what the person likes. There are dark roasts, medium roasts. There are coffee rounds. There are instant coffee. I mean, you name it. This is everything coffee related. Coffee grinds. This is something I've never understood, mostly because I've never been a dipper, but people who dip essentially coffee, a little bit wild to me. It goes on and it goes on and it goes on. Now you could go just click on the top coffee up top, and actually it's bringing us right back where we were. So you know what? We're going to go one more over. Actually, we're going to go to gear because this is what I'm looking for. This is things that you can drink coffee out of. You got mugs, you got thermoses, dog belts, Yetis, Chemex, you name it. So if you love coffee, if you love brands that were founded by veterans that exist to support veterans, I highly recommend that you check out Black Rifle Coffee. They have some great offerings. You can get things delivered to your house on the frequency that you want. They make great gifts. They do gift cards. Fill in the blank. If you're coffee curious, give it a try. Head on over to blackriflecoffee.com and see what they have to offer. Let's get into the episode.
Okay, got the red smoke.
Gun run, north and south, west of the smoke, west of the smoke.
Okay, copy, west of the smoke. I'm looking at danger close now.
Come on with it, baby, give it to me, I need it. You're cleared hot.
Copy, cleared hot.
Dude, this is the only reason I like social media is that you and I were able to connect, and then here we are.
Roger that, yeah.
That's, I think, the only useful purpose
Yeah.
of social media. Because without it, I don't know how we would have linked up.
And I suck at social media, so I'm glad to know there's some positives come from it, yeah.
You can just use it for communication if you want.
True.
So
True. Yeah. And a nice
Vivens,
proper
yes.
bottle of French red, considering
Ooh.
I'd be, I believe, the first ex-former legionnaire.
you're actually the only one I've ever met,
Oh, there you go.
which isn't that surprising, actually. There's not that many of you,
No.
from what I have heard.
No.
Here's a question for you. Where do we start? Do we start early life into the Legionnaire into now, or do we go backwards and we talk about what you're up to now and work our way to the Legionnaire part? I'm going to leave that up to you.
Fair. Yeah, it's
What revs your engine these days? Pun intended, I guess.
well, currently I'm Canadian until you guys roll into our part of the world. We'll see what happens, right?
What are your thoughts on that? Trump's a little just floating this idea of maybe you guys should become the 51st state unless Greenland hops on first.
Yeah. I mean, clearly Canada's not for sale. You can imagine.
I would agree.
Now, could we do anything if you rolled in? No. And annexed us? I could go Red Dawn finally and go into the hills. But
that movie doesn't end well, though.
No, it doesn't, yeah.
At all.
And especially with, consistent, considering it's not the Russians, it's you guys.
Yeah.
I think the rhetoric, I think I appreciate what Trump's doing. Canada certainly has its issues, and he's thrown us into a bit of a melee. Unfortunately, politically,
talk closer to that mic. Try to keep it about a fist away.
I think politically, Canada has its issues currently, and it's working in our favor, I think. The fact that we have Canada's gone through a period of 8 years of a demise in our country politically. And unfortunately, right now, we don't have a prime minister that will be able to deal with Trump in this discussion.
The voting populace in Canada, if you talk about the U.S., you have the L.A. basin, which is, I'm going to roll San Diego into that, 30 plus million people. New York, a massive voting bloc. It carries a lot of weight. For Canada, I know enough Canadians to know that just like the U.S., political beliefs vary a lot, especially on geography. A little bit more towards Vancouver, left or leaving for sure. Due north of us, Alberta. They're pretty hard on the right. You get back over towards Toronto. But are Vancouver and Toronto, is that enough to pretty much win the day from a voting population?
It's East Coast majority have the voting power in Canada. Obviously, we don't have the same political system as you when it comes to electoral college and such. But the Canadian, like if you look at the numbers right now, Canadians want to change. Trudeau's out. Unfortunately, he's prorogued, not to bore the listeners on Canadian politics because it is boring, but we're waiting for them to get their shit dialed, find a new leader. So we would, in theory, have a new prime minister that wasn't chosen for by the population. But the problem is there's no one right now to deal with Trump and these potential trade and tariff that are coming in, right? And the issue,
hard on that.
The thing for me is, Trump mentioned there's you guys are subsidizing Canada. Now, the fact is, it's kind of the wrong word. We're a tenth of your economy. I believe you guys are at, 350 million? We're 41?
I think we're into the mid-60s, if not high 60s at this point.
We can't afford to buy the same amount of products from you as you do from us. And I don't know the numbers, they can fact check me, but I think about 60% of that is crude oil and electricity. And I know for a fact that all your refineries are designed to take either crude oil from Canada or Venezuela, I believe. If not, they'd have to refurbish them all. So it's kind of unfair for him to say that you guys are subsidizing Canada. It's just we're not at the same level. We can't afford to buy what you guys buy from us. So
a lot of what comes out of his mouth, I think, is showmanship. If you look at the deals that he actually does or the things that he actually has done, and I'm basing that off of the last presidency, we're 3 days in at this point, and people are like, eggs still cost the same. I'm like, that might take a bit. But I think, here's the reality. Because he said a lot of things about south of the border too, Mexico. And they're not necessarily stoked, I think, about the renaming of the Gulf of America.
He's effective at what he does. And I think he does it purposely, right? He throws the spanner into the wrench. And then when it comes to negotiations, he gets, half of what he'd been talking about, but that's what he wanted.
Yeah, if you take your fishing rod and you go 400 yards past where you actually want to land, you're going to look okay.
My issue is, as a Canadian, it's embarrassing to watch how we're reacting. And we don't have, a leader that has the mandate for the next 4 years to deal with it effectively. That's what's embarrassing. The, Alberta, their minister has gone down, Mrs. Smith. She's gone and talked to them. I think she's the sole, one to do so. Meanwhile, the others just kind of argue between themselves on how we're going to react. But I think it looks poorly in the way I say things.
How long
Canada can do better. I don't know. I don't think, I think Trump gets kind of said that his big push is obviously for the cost of living for Americans, right, to improve things. Throwing tariffs on is going to cost, a lot of the products come from Canada, so that's going to cost your average consumer more money anyway. So I don't think he'd like to start his mandate that way. I'm hoping, for our sake, and we're, at the end of the day, all his points are valid, especially the our spending on defense. I think as a NATO member, I think it's minimum 2%, if I'm not mistaken.
GDP, right?
Yeah, and we're at 1.3, and
most countries that have agreed they're well below their commitment.
And I get it. I mean, obviously there's each country has its debt. The United States has been the police force of the world for a long time, but at a certain point that costs money, and you see the results in a way. If Canada can pull up their socks and be a better member to NATO, our military has been decimated for the last 8 years, that's for sure. Obviously we have the borders with Russia. There's nothing we could do. So we count on you guys, and he's correct in that. If something happens, we're counting on Big Brother to help. So I think your average Canadian would like to see better. I certainly would, coming from a military background. It's disappointing. So we should see.
It'll sort itself.
Yeah. Anyway.
Where in Canada are you from?
Vancouver, so West Canada.
The Couve.
Yeah, but I was born out east. My dad was ex-Air Force, so born out east, grew up in Germany, and then I finished high school up in Cold Lake, Alberta.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you're flying up there as well, too. Let's just go backwards in time. How'd you get into rotoring flying?
Yeah, so I spent 6 years in the airborne with the Legion.
Okay.
With the 2e Régiment Étranger Parachutistes. I got it in 2000.
But that's not upfront flying, right?
No,
okay.
exactly. But to answer your question,
it's like
fair.
Me, I have thousands of hours in helicopters and not that many upfront.
Lots of takeoffs. Yeah. So we were always in the back of the Pumas.
Okay.
And the Super Fairlongs.
Will you pull up PUMA helicopter?
Yeah.
Can you pull that up, Michael?
Puma, 355.
I get really lost as we get into especially other country helicopters.
And the Super Fairlong.
God damn it, Michael. A monkey could do this. Yeah. This computer kicks our ass. Let it go. Let it go.
Yeah. 332, sorry, yeah.
Okay,
so
I've seen those. Okay, I've seen those.
Puma, and then the Super Puma was coming into effect when I left. So we would do the halos out of those. And then they had the Super Fairlong.
How do you spell that?
Yeah. So Super is Super, and the Fairlong is Fox Romeo Echo.
F-R-E,
Lima O-N. Yeah. F-R-E-L-O-N.
I understood what you were saying. Michael's over there in vapor lock.
And I think one of the original Rambo movies, they used that as a hind.
I actually could see why that has.
But it's like a single rotor system Chinook, really, size wise. It's got the ramp in the back. They don't use them anymore. I think the French are the only ones, or sorry, the Chinese are the only ones that still fly them.
Reminds me a little bit of an American 53.
Yeah, fair one.
Yeah,
Jolly.
Okay.
Yeah. So that being in the back, watching the guys all the time. It was neat. And then I came after 6 years. I was 29. And it was either in the Legion you can do 8 years or you can do 15 and get a small pension at 15.
Nothing after 8 though.
At 8 you actually get everything back that you put into the social system, like your taxes. So you get a chunk of change back.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because you're not going to be using it, right? So they get it back to it. And the Legion, we can come back to it later on, but the Legion is a part of the French military, so you're paying into the French tax system. So at 29, I was kind of looking at my peers, seeing what was happening. This is all pre 9/11, so the global war on terror was not happening yet, and things were becoming somewhat repetitive. And I was always a guest in their army. I was always Canadian. I didn't get my French citizenship. I could have, and I decided to come home. Knew nothing about helicopters, especially on the commercial side. I had saved up enough money, sent it home, and invested it over those 6 years that I had enough to pay for my license, which was, I think it wasn't far off of $70,000 at the time.
Let me just tell you.
Had I invested that in...
At 29, you were better with money than I was.
Yeah.
I was investing heavily in Jack Daniels.
Fair one. As yes, red wine.
Yeah, I was deeply into Jack Daniels. Probably at that phase of my life, I might have been entering my vodka Red Bull era.
Fair.
So it was more of a liquid invest. I was very liquid.
Yep.
I just didn't have a lot of capital reserve.
The wrong, not the wrong liquid, but the one that didn't.
My timeline on trajectory of investments was 2 weeks.
Yeah. Now coming to that point, I can't take all the credit for that. I'd help people say, "Hey, you got money? They'll invest for me." That was actually my
I had
family.
people telling me that too
Yeah.
in my family, and I said, "Absolutely not. I get paid every 2 weeks, and I'm going to spend every penny."
But the difference, I think, when we come back to it, the Legion, the style of life, we didn't really have a lot of free time to spend that money on.
Yeah, that makes more sense.
Yeah, so you kind of ended up with this chunk of change. But anyway, so I knew nothing about it, but I got into the flight school with Vancouver Island helicopters on the island. It was funny because I did my submitted my application, told the Legion, my commanding officer, that I wasn't going to re-sign. I was heading off, and they understood. But I had my interview from the phone booth on the parade square. The parade square in our company, there was like a phone booth in the corner, and so I was talking to the guy, the chief pilot at the training school. And there was a bit of a delay, and he's like, where are you calling from? And I remember saying, well, actually, the parade square in the French Foreign Legion in the island of Corsica. He was like, there's a noticeable pause.
An additional pause.
Yeah. So got out in 2000, straight into school within a month or two. It was a 6-month program. I think there was a dozen of us, and it was 90 hours on the 22, and then 10 hours on the 206.
Okay. The R-20, so the Robinson 22.
Yeah.
And a 206, is that basically like the news chopper? I get lost in
Well,
some
that's
of the
your Kiowa, but not souped up. Yeah, so it's your built Vietnam for the training pre-205, 204, yeah. Bell. And a nice machine, The R-22, as you know, it's a bit finicky and
it is what it is.
Small.
Yeah. You're not putting rocket pods.
I struggled. I did not trust the R-22. Took me a long time. I didn't come out of there with flying colors by any means. I was not a natural. I could say that. The VIH program. VIH is a big company, and the idea was that they could, offer positions to those that shined. I did not get offered a position, but hey, sometimes they say that those that don't really shine early on, they can long term become a better pilot than the ones that are. I'm not saying that I did, but I wasn't a natural. And then I started for a company up in northern BC. Initially on the 206, just doing like seismic oil and gas stuff. And then
just
I got
surveying. You mean?
Yeah,
essentially?
and then what happened is obviously in the winter times there's not a lot of flying. So there was a company called Armour Group out of London that would take on ex-legionnaires, Anglophone, with English and French, and they had the relationship with Halliburton Oil in Algeria. So I had two friends that had gotten out earlier, and they said, if you're looking for money, because obviously flying helicopters at the beginning is fuck all. So I went over to Algeria and sat on a oil rig for 3 months. Pay was good, and in fact, that's where I wrote Appel, the book.
What kind of airframe were you flying there?
No, I wasn't flying. It was just so you're the
gotcha.
Yeah, sorry. The position was you called Operations Liaison Coordinator, OLC, and Halliburton was down there drilling. Essentially, they were teaching Sonatrach, which is the Algerian oil and gas national company, how to do things. And Algeria had a terrorism issue, so they would hire an OLC would sit on the rig, which were protected by the Algerian army or the police, and you were the liaison between the drillers. And, it was easy money. You hardly left the rig. You sat around. It was,
it's a good way to replenish your savings.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I'd do that, and then I'd come back, and then at 800 hours, he gave me the endorsement on the A-Star, the flat B, with a mountain course in Penticton. And then I could, in Canada, you need minimum 500 hours PIC to fight fires. So I started fighting fires with the A-Star, and then 2003, Iraq kicks off. I'm up in Fort Nelson doing seismic or something at the end. It was coming towards the end of the season, and Armour Group says, would you be interested in going over to Iraq? And this was early October. So I think you guys rolled into Baghdad.
March,
April?
Yeah.
Okay. And because of the relationship they had with Halliburton, and Halliburton was Kellogg Brown Root at one point.
Yeah.
Cheney.
They
split pre the war. KBR was given the DOD log cap contract to build all the bases or the camps,
staff all the chow halls, all sorts of stuff. They were all over.
So initially, they reached out to Armour Group, Kellogg Brown Root, and it was to man up a couple PSD teams using Iraqi nationals, so that when their executives flew into country, they could go from A to B and check out these sites. So it was it was an ex-SAS guy. Brit Intel, because Armour Group's ex-Brit Mill officers that created it. 2 RMPs, which are British Royal Military Police, and they had all the the course from I think it was the Ronin course that they did going into back in the Ireland days for because the SAS were doing a lot of the close protection and stuff. Anyway, I was a lone legionnaire. I think the reason she had asked I dealt with a nice Caroline Ruitt was her name. She was the operations manager for Armor Group. I had a crush on her. She was her twin sister used to model with Kate Moss. So if that,
I get it.
Do you remember? Yeah. Anyway, so I always had a.
I'm of the era where I can remember Kate Moss. Yes.
She called. I remember because my boss, we're in the crew house, and my boss, it's like early in the morning. He's like, Joel, a lady on the phone from London, and she gave me the whole spiel, but all I remember hearing is, Iraq. Would you like to go? I was like, I love you. Yes. let me go. Right.
But this was again. So you were kind of departing from flying.
Yeah. So this is the season. The season's over.
Oh, okay.
Again, I'm getting experience, but not a ton of money.
Yeah.
Having spent, so my interests are kind of truncated in that I'm learning my trade as a pilot, but having spent those 6 years in the military in the Legion, albeit, we had our overseas experience and stuff, but I didn't really get the experience of a soldier that I was looking for, and the opportunity to go and see what was happening elsewhere interests me. So so I went over. We flew over, and KBR had 2 floor levels at the Sheraton Hotel. You remember, it's just outside the green zone, south side across the river. And we flew in initially into Kuwait. We sat at that base in Kuwait, and then it was a U.S. Mil Herc into the BIAP.
Yep.
And that was October. So we flew in, the old straight down. And I remember we sat on the tarmac with, the big green machine was doing its thing. I know you were there at the time, but for me coming from the Legion, which is part of the French Army, which is quite small in comparison, it was interesting just to see the big machine work.
It is huge.
Yeah, and I remember we had our kit. I think there's 5 of us at the time, and we were just on the tarmac. There's going to be a couple hours delay before we had our ride to the hotel. And there was all the, it was the Army at the time, but all their sections. And I just remember watching and listening to the Army way, right? Just that, hey, Corporal, get the fuck out, whatever, that kind of, and just the similarities that it's like controlled chaos and anxiety or whatever the word is, you get the private writing over, yes, Sergeant, and just, what the fuck you doing? It was just interesting to see
It's impossible to be right. Whatever you're doing is wrong.
But it was more like, it was the similarities, but, the differences. But so it was neat. And then, so we started training between ourselves. This is a long time ago, so I don't remember the duration, but they taught, the SBS and the SS guys taught us the techniques that were needed. And we were issued right off the bat when we got to the Sheraton was the Iraqi-built MP5.
Iraqi-built MP5?
Yeah, so they had, So these were all taken, you guys had obviously, cleared some of these bunkers, and there was these Iraqi stamped MP5s, so they had the ability to, I guess, make them themselves, but they were not your HK built.
Still 9mm though?
Yes. So anyway.
Which is a good round for a rodent.
Yeah, so we, I just remember we're up on the 3rd floor, we got there, or whatever the 2nd floor that we had, and we're cleaning them, stripping them, and the head SAS guy, his name was Taff, well, he was Welsh, right? Big fucker. And in fact, he wrote a book. It wasn't, he was in the other detachment, not Bravo 20, but he was the one that they went on wheels over the border. Nice guy, big guy, gentle giant, but I could just see him watching us, right? Trying to figure out who these, and I'm sure me, because, the CVs would have come through, right? And they're all expert male, so he understands that they have a level of training, but he was like watching Joel, right? Because the legionnaire, what does that mean? And then we went downstairs, and the KBR security was run. They had their own little security run, and it was a gentleman named John Jones. He was ex-Delta, had been on the failed Iranian rescue attempt.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Desert One.
Yeah, big guy.
Which was actually the reason. Yeah, that's why Delta was created. Yeah. Actually, that's why JSOC had its origin because of the catastrophe there. That was the beginning of it all.
And I'm interested in your experience with them in Iraq, being attached to the, that's, anyway, so we got them all cleaned up. We go downstairs. They had a barrel of, full of dirt, just do a shot to just make sure that it worked. And we one round into the bucket or wherever, and they were fine. So then a week later, we had a soft skin Ford excursion. So we'd go to the green zone to get our admin work done because they were getting issued the DOD badges. Yep. And this is obviously early days. So, I mean, the east side, was that Assassin's Gate? Would become Assassin's Gate.
Oh, yeah, man. It's been a piece since I've been there.
It was just an American soldier checking, Yeah. It was pretty laid back. V-bods IEDs hadn't really
reared their heads too much. Later.
Yeah. And then we go up to the lakes up by Fallujah.
Yes.
And we used that as a training area, the ranges. And so our very first shot, double tap, and the second round actually fell out of the front of the barrel. Yeah. So there we
Yes.
yeah, there we are with, because obviously they'd issued us the 9mm, which was like in these fucking cases in these bunkers, probably for fucking years, right?
What I get out of that story is you better make the first round count.
Yes, exactly. So it was a nervous drive back, albeit things really hadn't kicked off, and we had, but the Americans issued us the M4s after, but they were the single shot, not automatic.
Which I think you're okay.
Same diff, but anyway, this is early days.
Yeah.
So anyway, I did that, and we got these Iraqis that were apparently vetted by the Green Zone, before you know it was time to go back to flying. I went back to flying, started doing fires, enjoying the job itself, but also it was that break was always a challenge. And I think when I fly into Calgary Airport all the time, I still get this feeling of anxiety because it'd be like fucking, you're coming back, you haven't flown for a while, and it's like, check flight, you're like, fuck, can I have her still? After a couple months. But, it is what it is, right? That was the time.
Were you married at this time? What was your personal life?
I was married and didn't have a son yet. And my wife at the time was supportive of the whole idea. She knew that, flying's not easy. She knew that I was interested in seeing these areas, but obviously the time away and the environment had its, we get into that. But and then I went back, and so 2004, things are a little more aggressive, and we were doing a low profile PSD. So we had a little compound, what was the West Gate that goes into the up to the BIAP, Irish, just on the wall. Armor Group had bought I think 5 or 6 villas, and we bought, that was kind of when the boys started going after the PSD teams, because there was a lot of people out there that were fucking around. That was disgusting in my memory. Where a lot of these guys that were working for these PSD teams had not experienced much in the military, and I got the impression they felt they had free reins to,
so there was
make certain choices that were, in my regards,
I'm not
questionable.
What I'm about to say, I'm not saying with judgment. It's kind of just the world that I saw it.
Yeah.
There was a void or a gap in capability, and there was a rush to fill it. Yeah. And based off of, I was never a part of government contracting like that or private security entities or organizations, but I had friends that were proximal to it or involved. Yeah. What they told me, so people can take it for what it is, which would be third hand at this point, if not fourth, is that the vetting process probably didn't live up to what people would have wanted it to be, at least earlier on, which leads to people who, if they join the military, say for whatever reason, but they didn't scratch an itch. Yeah. They have another ability to do so. And that world, I think, can lend itself to people thinking that there is no oversight and there are no rules, which can lead to substantial and severe problems overseas. Yeah.
Agreed, 100%. And, I can't say for Armor Group, and this is early days Armor Group. Previously they were called DSL. Like London, there was Control Risk Group and DSL Armor Group. My boss, though, at that time in Iraq, he was the ex-CEO of the New Zealand SAS. Nice man. There was good vetting. The legionnaires that had supported Armor Group in Algeria that were capable and able and willing. I had, obviously, because we can come back to it, but I did, in my 6 years with the Legion, I did 4 with the GCP, which is the Group Commando Parachutistes. So it's similar to the Pathfinders in the British system or the Canadian system. But each regiment in the French military, there's 9 right now. One of them is Legion, the rest is regular French. Each regiment has a GCP team or 2, and combined, they form the GCP group, which are attached to the French CUS, which is their Special Operations Command. So you can act as Pathfinders for your regiment, or you could work as the group and be second tier attached to the CUS.
Gotcha.
So at least I had a bit of, that side of stuff. We can come to it. But anyway, we started doing low profile PSD. So we bought, Armor Group bought, used Mercedes armoreds. We put the run flats on them, 2 vehicle moves. And the idea was to just fly under the radar. We're not overt or, low profile. And it would be 2 expats, Brett and myself, and Iraqis. And we had AKs at that point, PKM. We had the I think we had the SIG at that, or not, or we still had the Russian, what was it, Makarov? What's the fucking shit? Fuck, anyway. So we would, the Americans let us use the range. Remember when you came into the buy-up, just off to the left there's a range, I think. So we go there and we train the Iraqis up on firearm safety was the big one for me. And I was 2IC initially, so the TL would be in the front, Iraqi driver, 2 shooters, the guest in the back and a 1 shooter. And what we were doing is we were driving around, the Bechtel guys that were looking at, FLIR, USAID. So they were going to these different areas trying to look at, the electrical grid or the water system, trying to repair the stuff. So they'd have their appointments, and we just take them from A to B. So we trained our guys up, and then, we didn't have a lot of time, but we do the best we could so that they were safe, efficient, contact drills, debussing and busing, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you're going to do the best you can.
But then you just go out there and you learn your trade. And in time, we learned that, they were playing both sides. Initially, and the setup was interesting because I remember the armor was British Para-Reg. So the Iraqis would show up in the morning. They would go home at night, obviously. They show up in the morning. We would do a quick briefing. The vehicles would be fueled the night before, but check that they were fueled. We go to the armor. They'd get their weapons, their grab bags, their mags, comms, med kit. We'd load up the vehicles, and we had on top of the vehicles, we had it was like a dish. It was basically a contact pad on the dash. If we were in a contact, we could hit it, and we had armor group had a signaler in with the QRF in the green zone. So if we did get hit, and the QRF were able from the mill, they would come to our assistance. If not, other armor group call signs could if they're in the area. But that was the idea. So we do a comms check with our comms guy, check the old red button, and off we go. And I just remember the concerns are more leaving the camp and coming into our little camp because that's the obvious go-tos, right? But early on, we were briefing the guys before we left the day before of our potential destination, and then teams started to get hit more and more. So in the end,
probably with surprising accuracy.
Yeah, shocking, right? Shocking. So
almost as if they were waiting for you.
It was a pretty quick, learning curve.
Yeah.
So then we changed it up, and then one day, my driver doesn't show up. So I'm going to say to the guys, hey, where's Mohammed? Oh, we don't know. And about 3 days later, a mill call sign shows up with his DOD badge saying we shot him in an ambush or what have you, right? So then I'm like, fuck you guys, man. You guys are, a handful. I don't trust you. And that was my concern. I just remember, our concern too was, so you're trying to teach these Iraqis how to drive 2 vehicle moves efficiently, tactically, not jamming right up behind the next car in front of you. So if something happens, you're fucked. If you come up, God forbid, on an American checkpoint that has stopped the road and they're checking whatever, that you're like, stop, right? And they don't, you get that 50 cal over and you'd be like, what the fuck you doing? They'd be like, no, fuck. And I just remember these arguments back. I was like, God, what am I doing? Fuck. I miss flying, right? Yeah. A year later,
in that moment, you're like, God damn it! Can I get back in the helicopter right now?
Exactly. Well, anyway, so one day, at the end of the tasking, you get back to our compound. You make sure that the 2 drivers fill up the vehicles. You get the med pack, the weapons. You go down to the armor. He inspects them. A lot of times, he's like, nope, go do it again. It's fucking shit, whatever. Because they have their standards, but we'd hand everything in, and I come out, and there's both vehicles. One vehicle parked where we had gotten out, doors open. I'm like, where the fuck's Ishmael, the driver, whatever. Oh, he went home. So I'm like, mother. At this point, I'm getting short, And he came in the morning, and I made a comment. He got lippy, and I ended up filling him in. Not full on, but I gave him a pretty good dig, right? And then I said to my boss, I'm done working with Iraqis. And then not short after, I got an email from London saying, looks like Joel needs some time off, right? Yeah. I was like, indeed, I do. So then, I went up to Crete. And we were supporting the U.S. Corps of Engineers looking for weapons of mass destruction.
Did they find any?
No, shockingly enough, yeah. We didn't
I hit the number 1 chem bio target in Iraq.
I've heard, yeah.
By me, I mean I was I was a fly on the ass of a donkey that went up there, among many other flies, and we did not find anything.
Yeah, not surprised. Yeah, we I was TL. It was all expat team, and we were mobile PSD. So the idea was that when these Corps of Engineering guys, we were just outside. It was Camp Buckmaster, not far from Stryker.
Okay.
Was he an F-18 pilot that was shot down?
I believe so, yeah.
I think you guys went looking or one of your teams, the Navy, went looking for his remains.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
I do remember being briefed on that.
Yeah.
That came up. Oh, my God. That is a blast from the past.
Yeah.
We would hear that name every couple of years.
Yeah. Because I think when they took over the second Gulf, when they took over one of the camps, in one of the cells, they found his initials or his name.
Something like that. But that, God damn, that is a legit blast from the past. We would get briefed on that almost every rotation over there. Interesting.
Yeah. So anyways, and this team was all Brits, Kiwis, Aussies. I was a lone legionnaire. And it was just, it was just easy, right? The guys were all switched on. But they were hitting us quite a bit. And at that point I was like, I've had my share of this shit show.
Your cup of war had spilled over.
And then at that point, to answer your question, my son was born. And I was like, yeah, I'm fucking pushing it, I've seen what I need to see. But that being said, I do have some fond memories. There's some good guys. Armor Group lost, I think, because they also got, at the same time, they got the contract to move all the fuel up and down the MSRs. Mm-hmm. And so all their big convoy teams were ramping. I want nothing to do with that. But I think between, they lost almost 90 guys just on, So, and I remember back to Port Caroline, because I thought she was a nice lady. Her HR department, that was kind of vamped up for like, hey, here's your ticket to whatever. They became calling families and advising, I can't imagine, right? I've never had to, but anyway, so things,
So did you just dive back into flying?
Yeah, so I'd go back I'd fly. And then I'm flying, and at that point, Armor Group had gotten the Foreign Commonwealth Office, British Foreign Commonwealth Office contract to support their efforts down in Helmand in Afghanistan. And that was, initially they were looking after the Brit police that were doing the mentorship for the counter-narcotic stuff. Mm-hmm. And then they had the efforts down in Lashkar Gah, the capital. And I had been interested in it because being a soldier, I'd read all the books and watched some of the docs on the Russians in Afghanistan. Sure. So I was keen on seeing that. But initially they would only take Brits, but then it opened up to the Commonwealth. So Caroline called again and said, would you like to go? But you have to commit for a year. So I said, 100%, I'd love to go. And
did you ask your wife before you answered that?
Ex-wife. I think, I get along with my wife. Like, we have obviously 2 kids. We co-parent well. We're divorced, but I think we did well in divorce. But
the reason I asked is it's an odd occupation.
It is,
and if you are anything like myself or the people that I worked with, if somebody were to ask you that question, you almost answer and then you work your way back into explaining it to your wife. And the reason for that is you're committed to what you do. Yeah. You love what you do, even though to other people it's an absolutely psychotic job, and the job suffers last. So and that's why I asked if you asked her first, because I can 100% imagine a scenario where you're like, yes, I'm in, and then you hang up the phone and the wife's standing behind you going, who are you talking to? You're like, well, long story.
But to that point, I think thinking back to our relationship, the communication was pretty open, but the shit show was actually the aviation, not the security work for Armor Group.
Really?
Because at least with Armor Group, you knew you're 2 months on, 1 month off. The money was fair, maybe not worth the risk or reward, but at the time it was certainly a lot better than flying. Flying, it was like I'm going up north for, I don't know, and the money's shit, right? So, Vancouver's not cheap. Obviously, it was a lot cheaper back then, but I think the monetary side of stuff helped. The time away, she was used to it. It obviously had its results, but it was actually, and even for myself, is like I was more comfortable knowing, hey, okay, I'm gone for 2 months. At least I know I'm coming home. I got a month off where I can chill. It's not aviation where I don't know when I'm coming home. When I do, it's like they call me halfway through. Oh, we got a fastball. Can you, it's like, and that is hard on family, is when they have this idea of you're home for a certain amount of time. They plan things or holiday or what have you.
Then the plan changes.
Birthdays, and as you know, in your business, it's obviously the divorce rate is staggering. And AIDS, right? Aviation-induced divorce syndrome. It's a real thing.
First time I've heard that term, but I can understand.
Yeah. So I go over to Afghanistan, and it was nice because it was an MC contract, Foreign Commonwealth. the nicest kit. We had the HK360, we had the Mini-Me's, we had SIGs, we had brand new Toyota Armoreds with the latest ECM. Because it was a civilian contract, they could go onto the market. And basically the ECM was like a disco ball that put out a...
Yep, jammer.
Yeah, exactly. But it was the latest and greatest. Not, the military is always 10 years behind with... they had... I don't remember if you were... What, this is 2006, 2007. Were you...
I had just rotated in 2006 to being a BUDS instructor, so I was not.
Okay.
And then I went back to Afghanistan in 2010.
Okay. I was wondering if you remember, there was a Herc that was in white and blue colors that looked UN, but it wasn't. It was a South African company, and they
Really? I definitely never saw one of those.
Yeah.
That would stand out.
And that was the embassy. They hired, or the foreign, they hired it, and we put the Armoreds in there with the police, and we fly it up to what are some of the what's up north? Trying to think of the place.
Along the border, ABAD, JBAD.
No, the fuck. Anyway, I just remember all the runways off the old Russian aircraft off the side of the runway. It'll come to you. There's an SF base, American SF base there, up by the pass. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But we fly up there with the Armoreds. We put the Armoreds in the back of the Herc, and we fly there, and the guys would go out and train up the Afghan police on checkpoints outside the city looking for narcotics, and it was mind-boggling stuff. It was interesting to see the countryside certainly from the Herc, and then driving around, and then getting to see, kind of the American efforts and what the guys are doing. I just remember being, to a certain extent, envious. I didn't have that opportunity as a soldier to kind of do what these guys were doing. But at the same time, what we were doing was new and interesting. But then they're looking for guys to go down to Lashkargah. And that's the capital of the Helmand province. And the governor had a FCO advisor, and his name was Tom Crum. And he was obviously Foreign Commonwealth officer, but he was an ex-reservist SBS officer, politician now. But in fact, he was, in the previous election, he was one of the guys that was up for the prime minister. Smart man. But anyway, he brought up in proper British schools. His mom was Parisian French, so he spoke posh British. His French, because he'd speak to me in French, but it was better than my French. Pushtun, and he spoke Italian.
Jesus.
I know. And that's when I kind of we're not all born equal.
No.
Clearly, there's anyway, so we were embedded with the, so I was volunteer. So there was 2 teams and then 3 teams later on, but it was TL for team 2. And I had a young British officer that just came out of the Brit infantry. He's a doctor now. Nice guy, smart guy, switched on, but he was tired he had done Iraq and was looking at other things. The money was the attraction. I had 2 ex-Royal Marine guys that were switched on as fuck. One guy that was para-reg. And then, as TL, it was okay. I had that responsibility, but it was a 4-man team. We all got a job, but our job was typically we were embedded with the para-reg for 6 months, and then the Royal Marines for 6 months. And they had the little, the British system was the PRTs right in the center of town, the little reconstruction teams. And it was basically, this compound, but maybe the size of a football field, American football field. And we would drive Tom, the governor, to Helmand, had a compound just outside of town. And most of the time we would, throw him in the Armored. We'd drive to their facility, and they had a 2-story building. Tom had an office downstairs, and the governor had his office upstairs. At times we'd jump in with him, and we'd jump in the Chinooks, and we'd go to Musakala, Gareshk, Sangin. And this is full on when the Brits were struggling. I think they eventually, one of the teams went out into the middle of nowhere where the FCO, the Brit 2-star, and the boys had a little parlay, and it was agreed that the Brits would give, I think it was Gareshk or Sangin. They retreated.
Really?
Yeah, and they hired, because I remember they hired all these local, they didn't have enough vehicles to get the para guys out. So it was an interesting time. And again, flying into some of these fire bases, man, 2007, I'm 52 now, so whatever the math is, I can't do it that quick on the fly, but I was,
in your 30s.
Yeah, so
Early 30s, probably, yeah.
Yeah. I just remember seeing these, we'd land and, some of the guys, they would do the switches out, a couple of times they would bring a body bag on, and you look at the face in these guys, and they just fucking, had their asses handed them, or they've been up all night, and I just thought, fuck, good on you, man. Like, these are young,
yeah,
like, respect. So that was interesting and a good experience that I got to see that side of stuff. But I also saw the struggles that the West were having, and I wasn't questioning it, but I thought, fuck, why didn't you guys hire some of these ex-Russian generals that spent 10 years there and ask them some questions? And a perfect example is, and I made reference to the Russian aircraft at the end of the runways. The Mujahideen would drive trucks in front of vehicles all the time or mine them. And in Lashkaga, they had a dirt runway outside of town. And the idea was that anytime they had this beautiful brand new J model C-130. And whenever he was supposed to come in, the boys would go out, they would clear the runway, try to demine it, secure the perimeter, and she would come in. And one day, sure enough, there was a nice little mine there, and it hit the wheel. And that thing was off at the end of the runway, emergency stop. I think within 2 minutes, there's just a tail left. Everyone got out, but she burnt. And that was like, I don't know what a J model goes for, but fuck the taxpayer. You know what I mean?
This is why we have Michael.
Yeah.
Please look up the acquisition cost of a C-130J model. Yeah. Let's play a guessing game. I'm going to
300 mil.
No?
No?
I'm going to say, fuck, you might be right. I was going to say 90. Now I feel like I'm not confident in my guess.
Yeah, and this
I'm
is
going to say
2007, 90. But
what do you got, Michael?
C-130.
Let's see. It's coming up with model airplanes.
And in the back,
how much are those?
$380.
Pull up the old J model on the screen here. I want to see. The Hercs are an amazing aircraft.
They are.
The AC-130 version is my favorite, but
I bet you. Yeah, we didn't have the. I heard them doing their thing. 2.2.
I was close. Go scroll up, Michael. 114.2 million. That was close.
Yep, fair one.
All right.
Nice one. Anyway, they're not cheap.
Yeah, scroll down. I'm curious what that 2.2 million was. Scroll down. Keep going. There we go. Are related equipment to be sold to Egypt? Oh, that's a contract to Egypt for 2.2 billion. Now we're talking about bigger numbers. Yeah. Okay.
So anyway, one day we were sitting. I've been there about a year, and we also had a house on the outside of the governor's compound. It was like a 4-story typical Afghan house, and we had the HESCO around it, and we hired a local Afghan company to guard it. And the Brit Mill gave us a signaler, one of their GPMGs, so we could have a little more. And we lived in that sometimes. And 2 teams, and it was neat. It was neat times. And I remember in the back of that Herc that burnt was millions of dollars, and that was being given to the
cash money,
which was going to the warlords to just do their thing, grow their opium, don't get involved in the war, because some of these guys had serious stuff after the Soviets had pulled out, and I found that strange, and that was a juxtaposition. It's kind of watching the news and seeing what was happening. I don't want to get into that, but it was just interesting that it seemed like the war wasn't really going well at that time. And that's 2007 in result. Look what happened, right?
I don't know if it ever actually went well.
Yeah.
It went, but I don't know if it went well.
And I remember one day we were told, signaler and message came in from the PRT is no movement today. And we had built this little half-assed gym up on the roof, which is like an open floor. We'd stolen some shit from the camp. And all of a sudden we heard this run. We weren't far from the main avenue, and it was like a dozen tractors, trailers, tarped up with the black turban guys on top of their AKs, and that was opium going to the market, and off it's going to go, right? And I thought, that's us, whatever. It's not, but it was just an interesting, like, what the fuck, what's going on? Anyway, week later or so, we're sitting outside the Armors, and we, as I said, we'd take Tom to his office most of the time, and it's 2 Armoreds. It was a building, 2-story, typical, Soviet built thing, and it was glass windows, and we'd sit like this outside the building. The BG would sit in Tom's office, just at the front door, just to make sure people come in. There was a cement stairway, and on the other side was the Afghan army security team with their like Toyota Hiluxes and that kind of stuff. And the Brit Mill intel after let us know, but it was a 17-year-old Pakistani boy. They had brought him in from Pakistan, got him an Afghan army suit, the vest, did the whole thing, and he got himself through 2 checkpoints. And he'd walked up the stairs. He was trying to get to the governor. The guard at the door said, "Fuck off. You don't need to be here. I don't know you." And so he just walked into the Afghan guys that were doing the thing. And anyway, that blast. Obviously, the stairway protected our vehicles, but it blew the ECM off. All the windows, fucking, everyone was munging it. Watching movies. I remember what. Anyway, hit the old fucking panic button. We pull up. I know the BG comes on the radio. He's like, what the fuck, you know? I was like, we're out front, and because I'm lead vehicle, I pull forward, and then so that the vehicle would be right at the stairs. So I'm basically right where the guy did his thing, you know? And I just remember, I could smell like the burnt hair. The fucking vehicles were like basically crumpled in, and they were, anyway. And I just thought, learning after that I was a 17-year-old boy, I just thought, man, when I was 17, all I thought about was Stephanie Constable's boobs, you know, not doing yourself in, right?
It's a different ideology.
Yeah.
They get those kids, if they brought them in from Pakistan, like you're saying, they
Yeah.
would have those madrasas on the border area, like in Waziristan.
Yeah, exactly.
And those people didn't have time to think about titties and ass.
I know, but how do you fight that? That was my thing, right? Like, what do we?
You
I mean, I'm just a
completely
small pond in it,
restrict
but-
their time and only give them the information that you want. It's
Yeah.
like radicalization
Yeah.
101.
Yeah. So after that, I was like, you know what? Maybe I've had my time. I want to go back to flying.
I love how flying is all you're like, fuck this, let's go back.
Yeah, exactly. Might not pay as much, but this is
This guy just exploded from top to bottom.
No.
Maybe let's go back and fight fires a little bit.
And I certainly don't want to sound jaded. I enjoyed my time. As I said, I got to see the young men and women that were doing their thing. I saw, the big army doing its thing. It was interesting seeing the Germans there, all the different militaries, kind of looking around and seeing what was out there. So it was a good experience, but then went back to flying. And then, I've been, I moved up to the mediums, got into heli skiing. And
What's considered a medium?
so it's a Bell 205. So I went Bell 205.
Pull up a Bell 205, Michael, just so I just want to make
So
sure.
yeah, we can get away from the
No, we don't have to
scary
at all.
stuff, but it's
I just want to make sure I know what I'm looking at.
yep. So 205 is your Huey.
Oh, okay.
So basically, Vietnam,
Yep.
nice ship.
What do they call it when it has two more blades?
412.
412.
412,
Okay.
yeah.
And this is why I get lost in this shit because
No,
it looks
fair, yeah.
exactly the same.
Yeah,
There's
they
just
do,
more.
and it's the same. It's the same body. But if you go Bell 212, that is your so that's your twin engine.
Yep.
It's got the pointy nose. That is the 412 with the 4-bladed system.
Gotcha. Okay.
Different transmission. And then today I'm flying the Bell 214.
Good God, Bell.
And that is
Oh,
so there's McDermott on the left. That's a company I fly for. So that was
Okay.
built for the Shah of Iran. So before the
is that what the dude crashed in?
no, it was a 212.
Okay.
Yeah, but before the revolution, it was a Shah. So before the Ayatollah came in, their military needed a machine that could fly high and hot. So Bell agreed to design this, and then the ST, which is the one just to the right of it. That's the twin engine version.
That one looks.
Yeah, I'm doing
That
my
one-
training on that when I go back to Australia.
Now that one looks pretty. That
You would have
deviates-
seen that in Afghanistan, maybe.
I don't think so because
No.
I mean
Yeah.
I definitely saw Hueys, but that
Yeah.
one right there, that 214 ST, deviates from what the Huey traditionally looks like.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
That one's looking a little bit more Airwolfish, and I am here for it.
Yeah. Remember which was the Bell 222, right? Which was Aerowolf.
Did you watch that show?
Yeah, of course.
Because it was
yeah.
fucking
Yeah.
awesome.
I think there was some some stuff taken from it. I might be talking about my ass, but
Do you even know what Airwolf is, Michael?
yeah,
Airwolf.
I know that's fine.
No.
That's all right. That's okay.
It's too old.
You
for
don't
my
even
taste.
know. Do you even know who Jan Michael Vincent is?
Oh, I have heard that
Dun,
name,
dun,
but
dun, 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 dun.
Yeah.
And you look back at it, they were clearly wearing a motorcycle helmet with the visor taken out of it. That's one of those that didn't age incredibly
But
well.
if you look at the size of the blades on the fucking thing, they're massive. They are not far from the size of your table. I would say probably right there.
Really?
Yeah, by the guy.
So
2/3. Yeah, there's fuck. So it was built. So Bell agreed to build it for the Shah, and they were going to build a plant in Iran so that they could manufacture themselves. And then the revolution happened. I think they had taken possession of a certain amount, but they had the factory set up and built, and that's why you see the Iranian Air Force, which is down there on the right.
Yeah.
That's an Iranian 214, just to the left there, down.
scroll down.
Right down, yeah,
There you
right
go,
there.
right there.
You're on it. That's Iranian Air Force right there. So they're still flying them because they can build them.
Yeah.
And then they got the ST2 and the 212, which the president crashed in not too long ago. Yeah.
So how did you start flying in Australia? Coming back, is this just kind of once you get enough
Yeah.
hours and experience, people there's a community you can kind of
Well, it's a small, it's a pretty small industry. So McDermott, in fact, that picture used to be a Mustang machine. That's the one I actually flew, did my training on here just not too long
one
ago. On the
upper
left,
left?
yeah,
Okay.
up left. So that's Mustang owned a 214. There were 70 built originally by Bell. I think there's, I should know the number, less than 20 left. they abuse the shit on them. There's just a torque machine, right? And they've crashed a lot of them. McDermott owns all of them. I think there's 3 in Canada right now, 1 in the U.S., and I think South Korea has 2. But anyway, Mustang owned that one and sold it to McDermott, and that was kind of, I didn't have the experience or the ability to get to it yet, but when I did, I was I reached out to McDermott, and a lot of Canadians do fly for the Australians because at a certain point, and it's relevant right now, there's a lack of experience.
So I've heard this.
Yeah.
Essentially, not only a pilot shortage. Well, I've heard it 2 ways. I've heard that there's a pilot shortage, and then I've heard that there's not a pilot shortage, there's an experience shortage. Like there's enough pilots, but the experience level is lower than what you would want it to be.
Yes, it's a tricky industry because it's a lot of investment in money and time.
Oh, yeah, it's not cheap.
And then it's a catch-22. When you come out of your flight school, it's not like you get into a flying position. It's companies will take advantage of that. They'll bring you on as sweeping the hangars, driving fuel. They'll make sure that you're not a nitwit and you're going to ruin their vehicles before they let you get in the machine. But the problem these days is there's a lot of minimums attached to certain tasking, especially in oil and gas. Back in the day, that was a bread and butter, seismic, exploration. But now that it's all HSE based, they have safety factors. You need a minimum 1,500 hours, 2,000. Like, how do you fucking get there, right? And back in the day when the economy was good, there was lots of flying for these kids to get there, right? So it's tough. And then it's the biggest. It's considered a heavy. It's got the T55, so that's the same turbine as the Chinook.
Okay.
And it's the most powerful single engine twin bladed helicopter. And we tank. That's got the tank on there, 3,000 liters.
So that's a firefighter.
Yeah. So we're tanking. Yeah.
So you went from firefighting in Canada to firefighting in Australia.
Yeah. And I was on the 212 before, and it's basically it's the exact same size. The tail boom's a bit thicker because obviously the size of the tail rotor. The tank is bigger, more robust. But when you're in there, and on the 214 I fly left seat tanking. You're by yourself. You got the bubble window. 212 was on the right, but that doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't really affect anything, but you're always at limits anyway. So, it's either you're full water or full fuel. It's a give and take. So the machine's always at its fullest, and you actually kind of don't notice the difference after a while. But she's a neat fucking machine, and that's why I went to Australia because I wanted the 214. But that being said, have you been to Australia?
I have many times.
Yeah, it's neat. Nice.
Well, my sister was born in Melbourne.
Okay.
I've been to Sydney, Perth, Melbourne. And I haven't been able to spend an immense amount of time there, but I love it. I think it's super cool.
Yeah. And then flying down. I'm based out of Perth, so we have 4 machines right downtown Perth, and we're attached basically to the fire department. So we can find ourselves if there's a fire downtown Perth.
No way.
Yeah, we're tanking. Canada, you never knew. Now the tricky part is that you're right. There's the big international airport, so you're inside the control zone. They treat us like aircraft. In Canada, you're fucking on your own, right? So then they're talking to you like an aircraft. You have your iFire and your fixed wing, so it'd probably be easier for you to understand that. But when you're not used to it and they start talking like airplane, you're like, what, base? Or like fucking what? Like, clear to approach. Can I just go land at my fucking anyway? So that was the biggest challenge for me. It was just getting used to that side of stuff, and then their accents, man, because they'll come up on the radio with their Australian accent. You're like, excuse me.
Some of it's a little thick,
but yeah, it's neat. Now,
what's the closest you've ever gotten to killing yourself in a helicopter?
Well, we can get into heli skiing if you want. Yeah,
I always ask helicopter pilots, A, what's the worst mechanical issue you've had to deal with, and B, what's the closest you've got to killing yourself in a fully functioning aircraft?
And you said it right yourself, right? It's always pilot error.
There's how good you think you are, and then there's how good you are.
100%. And that's the beauty of the bells. They've been wrong so long. Those machines are dialed when it comes to the engineer. They'll start to tell you if there's a problem. So usually if you're going to scare yourself or kill yourself, it's you fucked up. I've had, touch wood, a lot of fuck me, holy fuck moments, but what you learn from, obviously. And I think attitude is a huge part, and a lot of like, especially for low time guys coming into like flight programs or companies taking you on, you're putting a lot of responsibility in someone's hand. It's kind of crazy, to be honest with you, the lack of time and experience that they let somebody fly people around, right? So I think they like to see a bit of life experience, a little bit of maturity, because you'll be less pushy. And the old thing was at 500 hours, you're probably the most dangerous, because you think you know the machine, or you know how to fly, but you don't necessarily have the skills to get yourself out of trouble when you do. Once you hit 1,500 hours and you haven't killed yourself, you're probably okay because you've done it where you're like, holy fuck, I'm not doing that again, right? My thing early on, it's weird, and that was the struggle for me. And obviously, I didn't fly in the military, but in the military, and you could equate to this more than I, but there's strict rules and regulations, and there's training, and it's not rushed. It's done properly for a good reason. Civil world, it's not taxpayers paying for the cost of it, so everything's somewhat rushed, and you're kind of thrown to the wolves, and like off you go, and that will vet or call the herd pretty quickly. But then at a certain point, it's whether or not you fucking kill yourself or wreck a machine, because the next company's not going to give you a chance if you've wrecked a machine, And then you just kind of learn, and the big one is weather. I think that was my early experiences. Slinging. That's a big one in Canada too. We're on the long line a lot, right? That's a big part of the bread and butter. And I flew into fog slinging once, and scared the shit out of me. That was my first fuck me moment.
Inadvertent IMC is
yeah, which is, as you know, a killer.
I think the survival rate, the stats are 90 seconds.
Yeah. And we don't, an IFR guy might be able to get that 180 done and not descend.
Yeah.
But we don't do that. We're not scanning. It'd be a fight. It'd be a panic. And that's heli skiing in a nutshell. So I flew, up until recently, I was at Mustang for 8 years, and then we had the heli ski tenure up in Revelstoke with Selkirk Tangiers up until last year. And it was 4 B2 A-stars and 4 205s. And typically what they do is within the company, they'll have guys that they, say, hey, you interested in heli skiing? Or you'll have guys that are interested in it. Yeah. And they're respect to them, the way they set up their system is we'd go up early season, late November when the snow starts to kind of pack. And you'd have your guys that have been doing it, but everyone has to go through recurrent training. So I think you needed a minimum an hour. Obviously, every year you're doing your recurrent training, your PPC, or your check rides. But for heli skiing, it was a minimum of hour recurrent. And then the new guys, they'd go out with a training pilot. And it's interesting because you'd get experienced guys, low-time guys, and really, as I'm sure you can wait, is typically those guys around 3,000 hours would kind of show up to try it. But a guy with 6,000 hours could be, shittier than a 3,000 hour guy, right? It's not really a bearing, but it was interesting that you'd have guys that you would think they go out for their first day and they go out for an hour training and they come back, they're like, I'm good. I don't want to do this, Respectable, right? You can respect that if a guy calls it. Or you've had the other guys that will go out and the training pilots find it's like, dude, man, this, you're not dialed, you're not getting it right.
Not what we're looking for here.
And that might be, a guy that's experienced, he's been, logging, doing other stuff, and the ego, it's hard on the ego, but it's done for a good reason, right? And the environment itself is those big alpines can be fucking, what's the word? It's not scary, but, if you're
intimidating?
Intimidating, yeah, exactly. So a lot of guys that have experience, we've had guys that did, search and rescue type stuff, like slinging guys off the side of the hill. A lot of ex-skiers, guys that, been in the mountains before. I think my time in the mountains in the Alps with the rep, doing our stuff was helpful just for understanding avalanche winds and stuff. But so what they do is you go out, and the big thing, I'm sure you'll be interested in this for the flying side of it, they're really focused on the approach. And anytime you're heli skiing up there, certainly in our company and in Canada, it's pretty much across the board the same, is you have a minimum of 2 flags. And those are stuck into the snow or into the rocks or whatever.
So for your visual.
Yeah, so it's got a flag on it. And initially that will give you your wind direction, because as obviously in the Alpine, it could be changing as long as you're not frozen in one direction from a storm that came through. But you've kind of judged, you're flown over your spot, you see the flags are flying, you've kind of figured out on your own what downwind is, you set up, and that's why they start you off in the B2, the S-stars, because you're a little less committed. You have that power, and you can kind of abort closer. In the 205 and the medium, you're committed way back. And if something goes wrong, you're just fucking going for those flags. So the flags are there as your reference, but the snowball is what can be your, to your detriment. And we get some big snowfalls in that part of the world. And if, let's say, if it's been snowing all day, you come into that first fucking landing. A lot of times you'll fly over it slow the first time if you can, but you come in, there's a fucking massive snowball, right? Yeah. So if you stick to those 2 flags, the idea is that first one's there, you get an idea of your rate of closure. It's like a walking pace as you get close. And then when you land, that flag is right beside you. So when it whites out, you're just like fucking looking right at it, right?
Yeah.
Or if you lose, and that's where the focus is on the approach. If you lose those flags, because let's say you've been a bit too slow, or you were downwind, or you were in the wind, it changed, and that snowball now is in front of you, because that's what it would do. The wind will push it. You lost it. As long as you don't change anything, theoretically, you should come to your spot.
So yeah, big theoretically.
Exactly, yeah. So they go out there and they just like to see the guys just fucking consistent.
Yeah.
And then it's a massive tenure too. So you get out there and then they just kind of, again, throw you to the wolves. So once the training pilot's like happy with your abilities, you do a check ride with another guy, and then you're skiing. And like they just say, take it slow. And the interesting part of heli skiing is it's obviously the heli skiing company is trying to make a buck. So you're out there, everyone's got a mountain course, but you do not fly skiing like you do in a mountain course, right? You'd go broke, or they would kick you out. Because,
I was going to say, take it slow, but also remember the cash register.
So it's efficient and safe, right? And every year that you fly, you get better because you have that gut feel, right? And that first year, and I remember, I slept well. We were done. I'd be back at the hotel, like fucking out, from the stress, right? But you don't have that gut feel to say, this is fucking. And we had some fucking super experienced guides, and they're looking at you, and they're good enough where they'll say, yeah, no, this is, and flat lights, we can come back to it. Flat light is the fucking killer, man.
Yeah, no depth perception.
Oh, it's just a nightmare, right? And they'll be quick to say, hey, this, this is not good for me. They don't like it. But you might get the guide that doesn't. He's pushing it. He's trying to get good snow, and a lot of times, if his clients are happy, he's getting a nice bonus, nice tip at the end of the day. And you don't have that experience to say, this is fucking shit, right? Whereas you get those seasons behind you, you're like, fuck that, man, I'm getting paid.
Yep.
This is not worth it. We'll go somewhere else. So some guys will make the cut. At the end of every day, the guys have their meeting, and they'll come back and say, hey, we had a couple landings there with, Joel that were spicy, fucking. And then, for example, which is good, right? And so they should. And as a group of pilots, if there's an incident or concern, the lead pilot would say, hey, Joel, this is what the guys were saying. Do you agree? You got any concerns? You want to go out? And then the environment I liked, because on the fires, every pilot's a fucking hero, and no one's going to say, I fucked up today, or I missed that drop. Everyone's like, the skiing environment, it was like, we got some experienced guys, we got some new guys. And if you come back and they say, how was your day? And the guy says, it was easy. You're like, what? You're fucking full of shit, man, because it's not easy, right? And you could listen to an experienced guy come back and say, hey, man, I lost my ass on that fucking landing today, and it was close, And young guys can soak that up, and then they're not afraid to fucking come back and say, hey, man, I fucking had a hard time. Because there's certain landings that are conducive to fucking challenging landings, and it is gonna catch you at some point, right? And then, as you get used to the terrain, because we're flying in shitty weather, man.
Yeah. Well, good snow is generally going to be, bluebird days are going to be rare. I went heli boarding one time, and it was definitely VFR conditions, but there was powder falling all around. Yeah. You wish it's the bluebird because that looks great on the GoPro, but if you want great snow, you go out when it's snowing.
And the bluebird, it's, as you say, it's bluebird, but then you're going high, and that machine's at limits anyway. So you're, and and certainly in the company I was skiing with, we have a Jenkins box. So if you have an exceedance, basically, if you over torque, over temp, NG, or RPM, an email goes straight to the office, right?
You need to unplug that thing.
So, exactly. And we have a sat phone. There's been many times where I've landed after I drop my guests off and I'm waiting, and I call my boss on the sat phone. It's like, hey, did you get an email? And they're like, no, why? I was like, disregard.
That's the box you find, and you put your coffee down next to it every morning. And you're just like, oops.
Yeah, but it keeps you honest, and those the guys have been abusing. But so you got the bluebird days. You're high and heavy, and you're always maximizing fuel for cost, right? Because we have, like, in our 10 years, it's fucking huge. I think there's a massive at the time. Is like there's a choice. There's obviously not 500 runs that are flagged, but they have that option. And we have little fuel caches everywhere, and you're working with your guide to maximize a day. So, for example, I don't know if you're interested in how it works, but in the morning, and we show up at the hangar, all the pilots are there. We'll get a text from dispatch with the group weights and your lead guide, and then he'll text you and say, "Hey, Joel, what's going on?" So, hey, I'm thinking of going to this run first, and this is my plan for the day. I say, all right, cool. I look at my weights. I get my org chart or my you have a chart for like the 205 where you can put in the numbers and it gives you the parameters. So I got this first runs up at fucking 8,000. My group weighs, 2,200 pounds. I can take, 70% fuel. And the charts say that the helicopter should land at that altitude.
That's what the chart says.
Exactly. As long as you got the wind on the nose and you didn't fuck it up.
Oh,
right?
the old chart.
So then you plan accordingly, right? And then that communication, it's crew resource management 100%, right? He's not saying you just come back full of fuel and say, oh, I want to go on this run now up at fucking 9. You're like, fuck, it doesn't work. We ain't doing that. And then you work the program around so they can have lunch somewhere nice and then you can go for fuel and it's just efficient, right? So you learn to be, efficient that way and your flying gets more aggressive, but safe because you understand the terrain and the machine and the hills, right? So it's nice to get those years behind you. But you always have those days where you're committed, you're just going for those flags and it's like beep, 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 beep. And you're just like, oh, girl. And the people in the back are just fucking, like, woo, having a great time. It's interesting. We have some interesting guests and there's always the briefs, beforehand because they show up and Selkirk had this program where you have everything. I had SpaceX guys that fucking right before they launched the rocket. I think the first time or what it was, they had like a group where they go out and fucking ski together and have a good time. And they bought this. There's a ski chalet right on the hill at Revelstoke. It's got a nice helipad. And these guys, they're mostly Brits. A lot of them. They've just built like the most advanced rocket in the world.
Yeah.
And I land in front of them in this clapped out 205 with rivets and steam fucking gauges. And I could just see them just like, what the, you know what I mean? Like, look at it. They couldn't ski worth shit. One guy had to pick up about 200 meters down the hill, anyway. But they have another program where it's day skiers, right? Where people have saved up. It's about $1,500 a day to ski. It's not cheap as, And this gentleman comes over after the brief and he's got a heavy set and he was ex-Marine, U.S. Marine Cobra pilot. I think he did the Jolly Greens and he flew for, I think, Air Force One for Obama or the White House. He's like, oh, I'm trying to talk my wife into I'd love to come up and do heli skiing. And, I was like, fuck, I was like, good on you, man. Well, I hope you have a good day. And it was a flat, light day, And he was in the penalty box, which is the side one there where designed for the M60 gunner back in the day. And we went flying and that flat, light stuff, like he'd be sitting facing, some of the landings would be like right on the side of a mountain, right?
Yeah.
So you'd have rock going like this. Then you'd hear the brrr, and then me powering up and then coming into the flags, brrr, and then snow, then you wouldn't see anything. At the end of the day, he just came over to the window and he was like, I'm out. Like, I'm not, what I mean?
I'll stay in the back. I will get out of this thing.
And that's not to say that he couldn't. It was just, it's a different, I don't think people kind of realize the...
most of the accidents happen on landing.
Yeah. And that's, whiteout rolling machines. Every year, typically, we...
hitting and then dynamic rollover.
Yeah. The dynamic world's a big one. Last year, they had a koala win and killed, I think, 3 guys. Not our, it was up in Terrace, but typically every year there's a machine that's wrecked.
Today's episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. I have tried to be as open and honest about my own journey when it comes to sitting down and talking with somebody, with the sole intent of, in those conversations, working through the variety of problems that I've dealt with in my life. And I know that we all deal with a variety of different things. But more importantly, in my hopes that it reduces some of the stigma. So if people are struggling and they don't know what to do and they don't know who to talk to, they can at least consider counseling of some kind. It has had tremendous impact on my personal life. Now, it's not magic. What it leaves you with is a lot of work that you're going to have to do yourself. But if you don't know the road or the roadmap to take, it's really easy to get lost. Now, some people will say, I don't really live in a place where there are counseling or therapy assets available for me. Today's sponsor, BetterHelp, can help you solve that problem. It is fully online. It makes therapy affordable and it's convenient, serving over 5 million people worldwide. It will give you access to a diverse network of more than 30,000 credentialed therapists with a wide range of specialties. And it's easy to switch therapists anytime at no extra cost. I hear this often. People do not connect or click with the person that they first talked to and they give up on the therapy itself. Please don't do that. Talk to somebody else. Keep talking to somebody until it clicks for you. I promise you that it is worth it. Visit betterhelp.com/clearedhop today, and you're going to get 10% off your first month. That is BetterHelp, HELP, Hotel Echo Lima Papa.com/clearedhot. Invest in yourself, people. It's worth it. Back to the show.
It's it's challenging flying, but it makes you a better pilot. Like if you have bad habits, they get nipped in the butt real quick.
Oh yeah.
And then come fire season, it's like you're dialed right. You're fucking good to go, and that's what I liked about the skiing is it made you. And it was the people in the back are great. The tenure, it's beautiful. You have some days where it's like holy fuck, man. You look up and like Jesus, There's other days you're like what the fuck?
Why am I doing this?
Yeah. But
how long have you been flying in Australia now?
This was my first tour, so I did 7 weeks.
Okay.
So I go back on the 7th here. I'll do the ST, and then that's the end of their fire season. Then I'm Greece for their fire season in Greece next.
Nice.
Yeah.
How many hours are you up to now?
Just short of 6.
That's awesome.
I'm short too. I started late. Most of my colleagues at my age are 10 plus minimum. My chief pilot at Mustang has 20,000 hours accident free. Fuck. You imagine?
No.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I'm shocked I got through 20 hours accident free, but
yeah. So what are your, enough about me on the flying stuff. What are your thoughts? I think I texted you once asking you, I'd be keen to know your, coming from the fixed wing background, what you thought once you could jump in a helicopter, the difference.
So the best way I've ever had it described is flying fixed wing is like a marble in a bowl, and you're just trying to hold it in the middle of in the bottom of the bowl. Flying a helicopter is flipping the bowl upside down and trying to hold the marble on top of it while you're moving it around.
Fair, yeah.
I'm really glad that I learned all of my basic aviation and knowledge tests. I'm glad that I did all that because I could just focus on flying the helicopter, which is, I try to tell people, it's not, being honest about it, it's not hard, but it's not easy.
Yeah.
Like at first, it's really, really hard.
Yeah.
But then you kind of get a feel for it.
Yeah.
And then it's not that it's easy, but it's not the hardest thing in the world ever. It's challenging at the very
Now,
least.
you started on the R-22?
No.
44.
First flight I ever did was in a Schweitzer.
Okay.
Which is basically a Bumblebee.
Yeah.
And then went right from there into a 44. And
That's my, yeah. Because it's got the weird collective, or cyclic, sorry. It's got that, it's got that arm,
it's the
T-bar.
Yeah. It is, I have a few hours in an A-Star. Those things are reactive to the control inputs. Yeah. The Robinson, I would say, prepared me for that pretty well, but it's amazing, and I think this is probably true of everybody. You want to overreact, whereas you just need to take a breath and be a little bit more smooth.
Yeah, they're humbling, I mean, helicopters are humbling as fuck, man.
Yeah, you have some really good days, and then you'll have a day where you consider whether or not you want to continue doing this.
I don't think that'll ever stop, but it's too late, right? Now you're chasing the dragon, that's the thing. You'll never master the trade, but you're... Yeah, it's.
But those are the things I like the most. That's why I like jiu-jitsu is you can't master it. You can get better at it, but it is a puzzle or a language that you're never gonna master that.
Yeah.
And to me, that's intimately fascinating. Yeah. I love that type of stuff.
What's your objective with flying helicopters at this point?
I just want to explore Montana. Yeah. It's literally what I want to do. I want to be able to load up a helicopter with a 3-day weekend worth of stuff and go somewhere in a state that most people don't get to experience fully anyway, and get even farther off the beaten path. And don't worry, everybody, I'm not going to land in a fucking national park because that does happen up here. Dudes, somebody was telling me...
It's a hefty fine too, right?
Well, somebody was telling me, I think it was today, some dude rented out an A-Star, landed it in the Bob Marshall Wilderness, which the regs are really clear on whether or not you're able to do that. Spoiler alert, you're not. Went fly fishing, got caught, and I think the fine was $800, which... If you got the economic ability to rent out an A-Star for the day, $800 isn't going to stop you. I just want to. It's another thing. I just want to live my life to the fullest. I guess would be the best. Answer.
Cool.
Explore Montana and not die. Yeah. I mean, I'm going to die at some point. We all are, but not in a helicopter.
Would you take family?
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Because if I'm going to go, they're coming too. Yeah. Death wise. Yeah. If we're gonna die covered in aviation gasoline on fire, they're fucking coming with me. Yeah.
My kids actually came up to one of the. Where I was in Cache Creek this summer on a fire, and I was like, "Fuck, come up, it might be a," and 212, tank, and we went flying, and I'll admit I was happy when we were on the ground. I think it would be the scenario where if something went wrong today, flying helicopter, it's self-preservation. I'm saving my own ass before the people in the back. Okay. But as soon as I have.
Don't make that part of your brief as a suggestion.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
it's like morning brief. Like, listen, if something goes wrong, I'm going to be fine. You guys might be fucked.
But if you had your, God forbid, you're fucking, I'm not religious, but
I get it.
You'd be worried.
You think about it more for sure. I mean, honestly, I think about that sometimes more when I'm doing a road trip.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah. What's the worst mechanical issue you've ever had to deal with? It's funny you hear about people 25,000 hours who've never had an issue. I know guys with far less than that, and sometimes I think this is pilot induced, but. engine failures because that was tainted fuel, though. Like
yeah, a lot of times it is. I've never had an engine failure, governor failure.
Yeah.
This is tricky on the it's manageable, but depends where you are.
For people listening, it makes it really hard to control the RPMs of the engine.
Yeah, and you can switch out to the automatic mode, but it's honestly, I've been fucking lucky.
Yeah.
All my scares have been just self-induced.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. No, it's a neat. They're neat machines, but they have to be.
You got to respect them.
Yeah, and we work with firefighters all the time. We got the smoke jumpers in the in BC. In fact, I got a nice Black Rifle Coffee story I could share. Just a shout out to them. I know you're a sponsor and stuff, but they certainly helped us out with some coffee for the
They
jumpers.
send a tremendous amount of product to places that people never hear
exactly,
about.
Yeah, so I wouldn't mind. But a lot of times they'll ask, we're typically on a fire, you're flying crews to the fire in the morning and bring them back at night. And then during the day, you're slinging gear or slinging water, or tanking, whatever. But they're always like, let's do the, northern Canada, especially a lot of times it's up in Fort Nelson where the fires start in the season. And some of those valleys are like the Nayshaw Valley in Vietnam, and I'm getting flashbacks, I'm like, blah, 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 in my Huey, right? But they're in the back, and so every once in a while you take a river low and you're banking, and they're like, can we take the river back? And you're like, it's fun, but that engine quits. I mean, at 212 you got two, but it's just, you're pushing your
easy.
Yeah. And I actually goes back to the Iraq stuff. When you're driving around, especially in the IED days, man, is, if you're cutting corners and going close to where, they've dug under the road, the culverts and stuff, at a certain point, if you're pushing things, your luck's going to catch up to you, right? So if you're flying like a fucking hot dogger, one day, Murphy's Law, you're going to be in the wrong place,
It's important for people to remember, regardless of what you're doing, if you're constantly seeking your limits, one day you're going to find them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And you may not you may want to just test your limits, but your limits might want to provide for you a little bit bigger of a test than you're ready for.
Yeah.
It's important to remember.
Yeah. So I think that comes with, as you get older too, you're a little less willing to push the limits. You got more to think about, but it's fucking tempting for sure. Yeah. No, I have a love-hate relationship with helicopters, but love wins. You're away a lot. It has its pros and cons, but at the end of the day, when you're your own boss in the cockpit, and it's good stuff, man. Yeah, I like it.
What led you to the Legion? Growing up in Canada, I mean, obviously Canada has its own military. There's a, JTF2, which is not talked about much, but they're doing a better job of telling their own story, which is, for people who don't know, a counterterrorism organization. And it's actually really interesting because I'm sure you know this, but maybe a lot of people in the U.S. don't, or globally. U.S. military is external owning. Pacta Comitatus prevents them from being used in a policing capability. I think they might be able to be used in a natural disaster. I think the Guard can help, but I think there's a mechanism, but nothing internal. Whereas JTF2 is a very interesting organization. They can do counterterrorism exterior and interior. Yeah. So you had options, right? There is a Army, there's a Navy, there's an Air Force. Yeah. How'd you hear about the Legion, and why'd you go that route? No, fair question. That's why I wrote Appel. Yeah, I answered all the questions, but well, it's better to hear you. Yeah, no, for sure. We can sit here and read it if you want.
Yeah, no, exactly. Because I suck at explaining things. That's why. So as I said, my military background in my family is pretty in depth, and when I remember being around the airborne, I was always kind of enamored with the jumpers. And
it's just a cool
thing to watch.
It defies gravity as a young man. You sit there and you watch it.
Dude, I had...
you're like, I think I need to do that.
The VHS, remember Hamburger Hill? I had that in VHS. Anyway, I watched the shit out of that. I don't know if they were, 82nd, 101st? But anyway.
One of the two.
Yeah. So I was playing hockey. That came to an end. I wanted to join the military. I wanted to jump. This would have been early 90s. I went to the recruiter in Vancouver, and there was no Reg Force infantry positions available. You could go Navy and all that kind of stuff. I was like, fuck that shit. But what they did suggest is, and the military was starting to go through a change where Canada was they're going to make a third of their force primary reserve. So they had reserve regiments where you would go through the courses that were designed to be similar to the Reg Force courses, and if there's any overseas tours, like Bosnia, that kind of stuff. A third of the men and women would be reservists. So I joined a regiment, the Royal Westminster Regiment, in just outside of Vancouver, and they were attached to the PPCLI. So they were jump tasks. So you do your basic, your battle school in Wainwright, and then you go to Edmonton and do your jump course. And I was in Wainwright doing my battle school, and word came down that the Canadian military is being restructured. This would have been 92. And that we were no longer going to be jump task, we were going to be anti-tank tow.
Not what you signed up for.
No, exactly. Yeah. And so one of our NCOs on the course said, "Hey, there's a guy," and he knew that I was keen on jumping, right? He said, "One of these guys that just came back from France, and he'd jumped with the rep in the Legion." I was like, "What the fuck?" You know, like, I didn't know anything about that. So I looked into it. I think I called the operator, and they gave me I said, "I would like to talk to the U.S. Army. Do you have a number over the border?" And she gave me, but it was Marine Corps. So I talked to the Marine Corps, and they had said it would take you a couple of years to get a green card. That I don't have any family that's American. So I looked at that option. I wrote the Legion. They wrote me back with a breakdown of the different regiments, the recruiting depots, pay grade. At this point, I'm 21, and I said, fuck it. I'm out, you know. I'd got myself into some trouble. I was kind of lacking direction.
As young men.
As you do, yeah. And that's, and we can get into that because I've had quite a few Americans reach out to me asking me questions about the Legion based on because
for those reasons, the desire to serve doesn't change when you make a mistake as a young man.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a shame, but
well, how did you even?
So I'll
how
continue.
did you even know what address to write a letter to?
I went to the French consulate in Vancouver, and they
really,
yeah.
Okay.
Because this is pre-internet, that kind of stuff. So it was
it's just not a well advertised organization.
I went to the library. I found there's some old pictures, history books of the rep in Indochina, because obviously the French lost the battle at Dien Bien Phu. That was kind of where the Americans got drawn into the war, and then Algeria. So they wrote me back, and I read the book by Simon Murray called Legionnaire, which is kind of the staple book on legionnaires. And he had served. He was a British gentleman, served in the Franco-Algerian War with the rep. That would have been the late 60s. And I was like, you know what? I'm going. And at the time, my dad was flying for an airline called Canada 3000. So jump seat to Dusseldorf, got on a train, went to Strasbourg, and I knocked on the door. And I had no plan B. And
do they tell you, hey, come here and knock on this door?
No, well, in that letter, there was a different depots at the time. I think now it's only Paris and the Fort de Nogent. But back in the day, there was quite a few. And all you needed was a valid passport.
From any country?
Yeah, any country. So I knocked, they take your passport, and they ask you, it's this is going back a long time, but some basic questions, why you're here, what are you interested in, why do you want to join the Legion? They look at your passport, take your stuff, and then you're kind of held there they do a rudimentary medical exam with the doctor within the couple of days, and then they just put you to, work, sweeping, cleaning toilets, that kind of shit. And then once enough people show up, they put you on a train, you go down to Aubagne, which is just outside of Marseille, southern France, and that's where the Legion headquarters is, the Premier. And there you're thrown into the recruiting depot, and typically you're there for about a month, and it all depends on the geopolitical situation in the world, but they can take about 1 in 15. So they have the ability to pick and choose what they like. And I have a buddy we did selection together as corporal. He's now a captain. He's French, but he's still in the Legion. He's got to be fucked, man. I'm after almost 30 years now because I left 25 years ago, right? But anyway, he keeps me up to speed on, how the Legion has changed, like all militaries, in today's day and age. But they pick and choose what they want. Typically, they like a young man in his early 20s, so you have a bit of life experience. You're not too young. They want you to understand what you're getting into because they got you initially for 5 years. You can have, what we were talking about, you can have some issues with the law previously, but they will do a Interpol background check. They're pretty effective. They have a department called the B2, and they will grill you. And they'll go, in this day and age, they'll go into your phones, all kinds of stuff, and social media. But if you had fights, DUI or whatever, fine. But no, like the sexual type stuff, no drugs, no they're not interested in that. And they'll pick and choose the guys they want. Prior military history is not necessarily something they look for because their system's very different. So they don't want to teach an old dog new tricks. And then once you're chosen, they have some now, because I was actually back at the training regiment 2 years ago and visited. Now, right away, you go onto computers. They have a classroom full of computers, and it's IQ tests and psychological evaluation. Right there, they can
Really?
And it was interesting because right away they picked up on 2 guys that were lying, and they got nabbed a year later in France for the terrorism attacks on one of the military bases.
No shit.
Yeah. And they do have French jazz are trying to get in and learn their skills, right? Because obviously, as you know, France had their issues there not too long ago. So they're getting very good at
Before you go further into the selection aspect of it, go for it. What is the actual role of the Legion? Why was it created? What does it do?
So, by no means a historian, so I know. And typically, in my experience, I stick to things that I find interesting. But initially, it was designed back in the 1800s by the king it would allow them to use foreigners or Frenchmen that were supposed to go to prison to have a chance to pay their penance, but also they wouldn't have to send Frenchmen to do their battles. So it was.
That's interesting. So
it was like a penal,
almost like a redemption arc.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And by design, even in the beginning, it was for foreigners as well.
So all the officer corps are French officer corps out of Saint-Cyr. Typically, about a third of the ranks are Frenchmen, but the rest are foreigners.
Okay.
Everything's done in French. So then
that had to been a benefit to you.
Yeah, I was lucky.
Parlez-vous français? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the one thing I say to guys when they ask is, know some French before you go. But you go to basic, and it's 4 months in Castel, which is just not far from Toulouse, where they build the Airbus. And that first month, you go to a farm. So there's about 50 guys, and during my time, the wall had come down. So in my section, there was a lot of Russians, Polacks, Czechs, Slavs, that kind of stuff. There were some Brits, Kiwis, Spaniards, Belge. That changes obviously as the world changes, right?
Yeah.
But you go to a farm, and basically there's 4 training regiments in the training company, 4 training companies in the regiment, and they all have an old farm that they've bought, refurbished to make it, like a barracks, I guess. And you spend a month there, and you get beasted. And that's where you kind of learn. You actually spend most of your time learning how to fucking sing as a collective. It's insane, but it's effective. So they keep you up all night. You do the ruck marches. There's a lack of food. There's a lot of discipline. And is
this a quit whenever you want to type of fare as well?
No, you can desert, and we had deserters. But at the end of basic training, at the end of your 4 months, you have a chance to go civilian or stick it out for the 5 years. So they give you a chance to.
That's an interesting off ramp they give you, or a choice, let's just say.
So it really weeds out because they're aware. They've been doing this a long time. They're aware of there's certain people that join for the right reasons and the wrong. And it'd be like for yourself, guys that go and come to buds, right? It's a mental thing, right? They might have a vision of what they're getting into, but then they realize this is not for me.
We'll let you quit day one. Then.
Fair. Yeah. So
we'll let you quit minute 1 if you want to.
And to my point is where they're effective is after a month. You march back into the regiment with your white kepi because you're issued that at the end, singing the regiment song in tune. And the Legion March is the slowest marching military in the world. It's 88 steps per minute. I don't know I think the Canadians are 120 or something. I might be wrong, but it's slow, right? And the song is slow like it. And it's actually pretty impressive, that low, deep kind of.
What do they call this? Because we're pulling this shit up right now.
I know. You could probably, Legion marching singing. It drove me nuts, right? Coming from my small experience with the Canadian military, that's just the band. But if you put Legion marching, yeah. But the fact that they're able to do that in a month, we had Koreans. No, that's the band. But if you
stop looking at the band, Michael, you weirdo. The Hell March.
Keep going. First of all, French Foreign Legion marching. There you go. That one there. No, down.
Down. Yep.
Yeah, that's in Corsica, and that's where the regiment's based in Calvi, Corsica.
You can do it, Michael. You can find it. Oh, that is a slow pace. That is painfully slow pace.
Yeah. You get there last. Yeah.
I'm going to be honest. This is the pace Leah walks at.
But
she tells me I'm a fast walker.
Oh, really?
And I look back and I'm like, have you considered that you might be slow?
But, after 4 weeks, that's pretty impressive. You can take, individuals from every different background. Like the Russians, the alphabet's different. So to learn
Cyrillic, yeah. I mean, let's be honest. That sounds and looks badass.
Yeah, it's impressive. I mean, and they don't change it because if it ain't broke, why fix it? You know.
What does the black hat mean?
So those would be sergeants.
Okay.
So they're NCOs. So you have a black, as with the officers, but their ranks, those are probably sergeants.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway.
Michael, I have an idea.
Yeah.
I would like to sponsor you going to France and joining the Legion.
For some reason, I knew that was going to be your idea.
Can we make this happen? First off,
Yeah.
you used a term earlier called deserter, which is what we can expect.
Yeah.
But I think it would be cool to like try.
Well, because there's the option to go out after 4 months, right?
Yeah.
Can we be really honest about the fact you're not going to make it to 4 months?
Is it illegal to be a deserter? Because in that case, I think I would.
No, I mean,
such a great
if they
idea.
catch you, they throw you in jail and then they're like, at the end of the day, if you don't want to be there, they don't want you. So
Right,
and there's the administrative ways of getting it right. It's effective, right? I mean, they're doing it for a reason, right?
You'll get home at some point. I'll help.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But let's get you there. I
I'm
need
not
you to
really
research
sure.
what door you need to knock on, and we're doing this.
Okay. Perfect.
So I mean, yeah, it's very different, and I found that challenging, but there's a reason for it.
Okay, so you do the march after a month, then what comes?
Then you have your 3 months, you're back at the regiment, and then they get into the firearms, the exercises, and you learn basically. The idea is that every legionnaire that departs the training regiment, when it gets to their differing regiments, they have the base of a legion, like the Marine Corps. Actually, the Legion is probably, if anything, it's similar to any arm of the military. It's probably the Marines.
Okay.
Everyone's a rifleman, and then and then based on the 4 months, there's how you finish in your course. The top ones, they let you choose. And then obviously towards the bottom, they start to send you where you want to go. You have to be a volunteer to go to the rep, which is the airborne regiment. And then off you go. And every regiment differs. And anyway, so I went to the rep, and I joined the first company, which is fighting in amphibia. Is their special. There's 5 companies, and one's amphibious. There's the mountain. There's the first, which is fighting in built-up areas, and then the other one, the fourth, which was, they had mortars, snipers, all that kind of stuff. And so I got there in, what was it? I did 6 years, so I was in the GCP for 4 years, so that was 94. And then I did selection for the GCP. So, and that's where, I think I sent you that clip once. But the difference in their system is it's not necessarily that you volunteer. They'll say, hey, Joel, are you interested in going GCP? Because you need to be signed.
What is GCP?
So that's the Group Commando Parachutistes. So that's like the Pathfinders for the
Gotcha.
for the regiment. Guys can be volunteer, but you need to be signed off by your lieutenant and then the company captain. And typically, it's a regiment's 1,500 strong. So it's a captain that runs the GCB team, and they're all obviously a small community they're talking. So they're going to say to their comrades or the company captains, don't send me fucking retards, just
totally.
send me. So that being said, if there's problem childs in the company, they might say, all right, off you go, right? Because as you know, sometimes problem childs make good soldiers too, right? But anyway, so I did the selection for the GCP, and you had to be a minimum of a corporal, and I was a private, premier first class at the time. And it was the process is somewhat different. It was a 3-week selection process, and it was a group of, I think we were 20 odd from the different companies, a mix of corporals and first class. They put you through the original, the typical. The big staple for the French military, and certainly the Legion, is you do a 1,500 meter ruck run in a certain amount of time, and then you get, I think, 5 minutes, and then you do 8K run. That's their big one. Then there's the combat assault course, and then for the GCP, it's a 35K run. So they do that in the first week, and then they have their, you go to the range. They do their assessment, and it depends on what they want, because they have different cells. So if they're looking for a signaler, they're going to be kind of pinpointing towards it. If they're looking for sniper guys, well. But in the end, they you go out and you spend a couple of weeks working with in the rep. There's 2 GCP teams, so they introduce you into the teams, and you'll go do exercise with them. And the big one for them is they're looking to see, and it would be similar to your background in the SEAL team, is a guy that's able to fit within a team environment and willing to learn, because at the end of the day, they're going to teach you how to do your thing. So they want to see that guys, they're a good mix, they fit and they have the right attitude. So you might not be the best runner or whatever, but you fit there. So I was, as I said, I remember they took us to an old prison up in the back of Calvi. There's an old Spanish fort it was a prison back in the day. But we were out there, and then the captain showed up in his Jeep, and he said, all right, put together a plan how you would assault this, and you could use, any weapons that the regiment has, and you could, put together your plan, and I'll go over it. And so we all did. I was thinking about this actually driving up, and I think I was like fucking old school. It's like France trenches, the whistle would go, and we were just gonna fucking, over the breaches, I bet you some of the guys were like, well, we'll halo in, and we'll use all. But anyway, so at the end of it, we'd have to sit in front of the captain, and you look at your plan, and he probably just shook his head. But I remember he said to me, how do you feel you're doing, Joel? And I was like, here we go, right?
Trick questions.
Yes. I said, well, sir, I'm giving it all I can. I'm doing my best. Obviously, there's a lot to learn, but I can honestly say no regrets. I don't feel. He said, all right, we'll take you on, but we got a slot for you in the corporal's course. So you're gonna have to go tomorrow, and then so I missed the rest of. So I was fortunate to get on, and I think that had a big part to do with. I'm Canadian, so there's that historical connection between France, and I had a decent level of French. And then I was young, I was fit, I was driven, and I think, I was lucky. But the reason I say that is not to blow smoke up my ass, is that I was fortunate in my time in the Legion. So I went off, I did my corporal's course. It's a fucking shit show. And I remember you go back to Castell where you do your basic, and it's a 3-month course. And we had an adjutant, which would be like a sergeant major, I guess, who was running the course. He was a Portuguese. He had done the commando course down in Manaus in Brazil. Mm-hmm. Anyway, when you showed up to the course, you had to, you're in uniform, and you had to knock on the door, go into his office. It was him and then the 2 senior NCOs that would have the 2 different platoons, and you had to do your typical presentation. And I fucked up my first, it was like, your rank, all that stuff, and fucked it up, and did it fucked up again. And I remember he kind of looked at his, the 2 beside me, and he looked at me and said, in French, he's like, are you retarded? And I was like, good start,
Sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, so I did my my corporal's course, and I came back to the regiment. And when I got to the company and checked in with the duty sergeant, he said, pack your bags, you're going to Central Africa. And the team, this is 1996, Alban 2, the team had gone to Bungie, Central Africa, where there was civil war going on, but they were short one guy. So when you get in the GCPD, you have to do your commando course, which is on Mont Louis in the Pyrenees Mountains. And then you go to Pau, which is the French parabase just outside of Toulouse. And then that's where you do your Halo freefall course. And then once you've completed those, and that, once you wait for your spots, it could take over a year and a half. And then you wouldn't join the team. You'd just be, to the side waiting for your courses. And then once you were, you had the wings, the free fall wings in your commando course, and you would join the team. And but they were short, so they sent me, and I flew into. I was on a DC-9 a couple of days later via Chad, and we landed in Bungie, Central Africa, and my captain came in the front. Everyone else in the plane, they're all French military. They were going to, I don't know where they were going. But anyway, he said, Joel. I got out, and that night I was kitted up with my FAMAS, and it was the first time I left the gates with a weapon loaded on safe, and it was, for me, that was about 2 years in the Legion. So being an officer's kid, Canadian from a world war, pretty fortunate. All of a sudden here I am downtown Bungie, with the GCP, and I'm not yet a team. I'm not fully qualified yet. I'm just like head on a swivel, man. It was a neat, and as I said, a lucky introduction into the Legion and the regiment itself. So then I did that. Obviously did my commando course offer, did my free fall course, and then the free fall course. I was the only legionnaire in the course. They broke it up into 3 branches, but you'd go. They'd teach you how to jump. We had the big old GQ rigs. I think the Brits use them too. The SAS, a big blue square. Mm-hmm. The French came out with their G9 later on, but they would teach you with the Pilatus how to jump. And then you'd move to the Herc or the Transel, which was the smaller. Yep. And then you'd work up on that, and you'd have one instructor, and you'd obviously your background's in that. You'd make sure there was no lateral movement. You could do all your stuff, and then once they're happy with your control,
they say go get some.
Yeah, and then they would add you up, and the idea was that to get those 10-man, and then you did the night jumps, and I was there for 3 months, but I had. One guy, he actually taught the course. He was ex-GIGN, so the French anti-terrorist team. And interestingly enough, he was a switched on guy. He had joined the GIGN as a young gendarme, as you do to join that. And in their system, they attached a new guy to a more experienced guy. And he was, remember when they raided the Airbus in Marseille?
Yes.
He was, I think, number 4 in the door. Because
you want to talk about a mission I would
Yeah,
never want to do?
Yeah.
Like, hey, let's steal from you every tactical advantage known to man. You may be able to approach this unseen, but at some point you're going to go through a porthole, and they're going to be waiting for you.
I know.
Hard pass.
Ballsy, man.
Oh.
We actually visited their compound, and I saw the helmet where the mask. They got those thick fucking helmets. He took the AK round, and knocked him out, but it saved his life. But anyway, he was switched on, and I remember one of the entry exams was you had to do laps in the pool, a certain amount of laps in time. So here's a GIGN guy, and then you got the legionnaire, Joel, and he's supposed to stop you when you're done, and you just let me go. And I'm like, like a fucking, like, you know, like, it's what I think fucking legionnaires, man. What the fuck, you know?
Did you guys wear different uniforms? How were they able to identify you as a legionnaire?
I'd have the white kepi.
Okay.
Too.
So you always wore that?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, no, we had the green beret.
Okay.
So that's more parade wear. But, yeah, when we would be in comments and like jumping, it would be green beret. But when I would like leave garrison and I'm traveling back and forth, it would be the white kepi.
So visually distinct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember we finally, you know, and I liked my big thing. I couldn't wait to get out of the Herc and going out the side door. The ramp, cool at night, whatever. But it was, you know, that side door where you pull yourself into the. It was just, for whatever reason, that's what I wanted, right? And I wasn't into the civilian skydive. I was more like, what interested me is the operational side of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I enjoyed it. I think I was lucky. I got the long arms, long legs, and so I was able to, you know, I was a stable jumper and did okay. But I remember at the end, we had two teams of 10, and the final jump in the ceremony to get our wings was on Wright Field, and that's where the Wright brothers had flown the planes to introduce them to the French. And the regiment CO was there, and all these guests, and we landed about a mile short. And we had to walk back with our rigs on and our gens on our shoulders, like fucking. I thought that was pretty fucking funny. But yeah, you know, it was but again, I'm the only legionnaire. The other ones were we had the French equivalent to the SEAL programs. We had a couple Air Force, the JTAC types. Mm-hmm. They had the other GCP, obviously regiment had their guys French. So I was the sole legionnaire. So it was interesting to kind of see the French army for what it was, and then I think it was interesting for them to see what a legionnaire was all about. But it was a good time. And at the end, I went back to I drove back down to Toulon, where the guys had their base there. The Hubert is the name of the guys, and one of your U.S. Marine submarines was there, and the SEAL team was there cross training.
Interesting.
And that's Toulon. That's their big naval base. And at that point, that's when I was kind of like, fuck, man. And then I just remember the thinking is I got to go back to Calvi and the regiment and the Legion. And it's old school, and just gâteau, which is a French translation for gâteau is cake, but it's just like very like hard-headed and strict. So I had to get my hair. I had to let my hair go, and I was having this, good time. And I think it wasn't albeit I was new, but I could kind of see that, this is kind of what the real military experience should be, where you have a life. Whereas the Legion, it's very kind of, and for the first 5 years, you can't wear civilian clothes.
Why is that?
They've changed that rule since, but it's just the way. I don't know why, a discipline thing. It just, but they did, and it's. I used to hate that. You go out in town, Calvi's in the summer, of course, because it's beautiful and you got a lot of tourists, but you have to walk around. The MPs would be trolling around, and if you're out of sorts, if you got a stain on your uniform, or your kepi's dirty, or it's they'll into the back of the Jeep and you're in jail. So it was tough that way, but whatever. It is what it is, right? I was fortunate, and then after 6 years, I just decided it was time to do something different. I was young enough where I could make a change,
Is it true that in the Legion, if you continue on at some point, they will issue you a French passport and you can get a new name and all that stuff? That's
changed. So in my time, after 5 years, as long as you had a good service record, typically you would get it. I didn't go after it. Retrospect, I wish I had, but as I said, I was always a proud Canadian. I just felt like I was a guest. They were giving me this opportunity. Unfortunately, the Canadian military wasn't. But I always had plans to go home. it's changed since. Now you have to, I think, do more time, and it's a case-by-case basis. Unless you're injured. If you're injured, they give you the passport.
Do they also allow you to change your name? I've heard people talking about that.
They do. I didn't.
Is that like a fresh start, essentially?
It's more a protection for yourself and the Legion. So a lot of countries, especially the Eastern Bloc countries, it's illegal to serve in a foreign military. So what they do is they would give you a false name, and if someone calls saying we're looking for, Andy Stumpf, well, you don't exist anymore. You're Bob, whatever. They use
that would be Pierre.
yeah, exactly, Pierre.
Pierre Le Pew.
Yeah, Pierre. There you go. Perfect. But I didn't. Right?
I don't know what any of that
didn't,
means.
And you can go through a system. It's called rectification, where you can get your name back in your passport. But for me, as I said, I had a good experience. I respect France and the Legion for what they did, and that's why I think my efforts, writing the book Appel, and then at least talking about when I can that's not my place necessarily. I'm not a recruiter. I'm not done, but there is a lot of misconceptions and bullshit out there.
Oh, there's a ton.
Yeah, and I find it frustrating.
How do they feel? How do other legionnaires, or how does the Legion feel about people speaking publicly about it?
So, good question. It depends how you're speaking about it.
Yeah.
So, for example, Appel, and that's where I kind of ran into you, as I was the guest on Jocko 219 podcast, and he had me on because I wrote Appel, which
in his interrogation chamber studio.
Yeah, my very first
with
podcast.
A single fucking
my very first podcast.
Light bulb and padded walls. You're like, are we talking? Or are you beating the living shit out of me?
I
for
think I was
information
as bad as I am now, but this will be my third and last. But so Appel to date is, I sent a copy of the final draft to, as I said, my buddy Dimitri was working. I sent it, and he sent it up to the general. Not that the general would read it, but I said, this is what I'm planning to publish. If you have any concerns or issues, and basically a no response is a positive response, right? They didn't say cease and desist. They didn't say, and then my captain, Demoon at the time, at GCP, he went on to be the CEO of the regiment, and he actually jumped with the regiment into Goa in Mali. Went on to take over the French Airborne Division, and now he's a general at the NATO headquarters in Brussels.
Damn.
So he wrote the foreword. And then Wilfrid Laurier, which is, it's a university press, but they're somewhat reputable, they published it. So that was, three things that I wanted. The narrative was approved by the Legion. There was a foreword from an acting officer, and then a reputable publisher. So the story doesn't have, spelling mistakes and fucking. Yeah. And then it's legit, right? It's factual. So they've appreciated that. I think that's why they invited me to the regiment, and we sat down, and they used it on some of their social media stuff. It's a positive portrayal. By no means is it, as you know, in the military, it's not all action, and it's
almost never, it's almost never action.
And it's a different type of military, and it's, be careful what you expect. I was fortunate, but it can be tough, especially if you're there for the wrong reasons. Now, unfortunately, a lot of times the people that talk about Legion are deserters, and I'll be straight up. Any current Legionnaire, certainly any previous Legionnaire, I can talk for them. The one thing we dislike the most is deserters that talk about the Legion, if it has any disparaging side to it.
And for clarity, by that definition, you mean anybody that didn't meet the contractual obligation?
You left.
Okay.
You didn't come back.
Yeah.
Now, whatever. You make your call, you do what you want to do. But if you start shit-talking Legion or sharing your narrative why you left, you're full of shit. The fact is you left, so it is what it is, right? Just take it on the chin and leave it be. Some people will call bullshit, others will just let it be because it's transparent as it is. On my side, it's been, I haven't, to be honest, I haven't had any negative feedback, but my story it's a positive portrayal.
Why did you decide to write it? What were you trying to achieve with the book?
I think it was that. I certainly never envisioned writing a book. I'm not a writer. It's not something I thought I would doing.
I don't think you can say that with a book being published.
Fair enough. But it's not something
not a writer by trade.
Yeah. When I came back from the Legion, my mom's father retired as a 2-star, and he was doing his. He actually was awarded the DSO by Montgomery on the field. So he was my hero as a young man. And he had his reservations when I said I was going to the Legion. He had run into them. He actually flew into Dien Bien Phu in Indochina 10 days after the French capitulated with the UN. It was the early days of the UN, but he was the 2IC because the UN was there to watch the gradual withdrawal of the French. And he he had some concerns about the Legion, albeit it's changed. So I would write to him when I was in the Legion. I'd say, hey, Graham, this is what we're doing. And I think he kind of learned that it wasn't necessarily what he thought it was. Mm-hmm. And then when I came back, he was, he would talk to me a lot more open about certain things that he experienced, obviously the Second World War. And he was, not that I experienced anything, but I think you can attest to this, is people that have experienced maybe a small bit of combat or a lot, they'll be more open to talking to it about someone that has than another person who say they won't necessarily grasp what they're getting at, right? So I think
there's a shared vernacular.
Yeah.
Or just
and it's humbling, right? Like
it's humbling. There's
no
a shared
bravado,
experience.
Yeah.
There's references that you would be able to talk about and connect over, even if combat or no combat. Yeah. Exposure in being ingrained in the military environment gives you, if it's anything like the U.S. military, it's a completely different language.
And by no means did I have anywhere near but I think he gave me that respect, I guess would be the word.
It's a common connection point.
He was doing his degree at university at the time at 80, whatever it was, and he hadn't kept a journal during the war. So he was writing his memoirs, and he regretted it. So he said, hey, Joel, if I have any advice for you, if you didn't, write it all down now, because when you're my age, you'll regret it, So on that rig in Algeria, that first time, I put 150,000 words of fucking exclamation marks, fucking no, like caps, and it sat for 10 years.
Wow.
And then no books kind of came out. There's one there's a couple that are out. There's one in particular guys always reference called A Mouthful of Rocks, and it's a British guy from the Rep, but he was a deserter, and result his narrative. So after a certain amount of time, I was like, you know what? And then I enjoyed reading that genre. Bravo 20, all that kind of stuff. I was always just interested in, and a lot of times I'd read them and I'd think, I can tell that guy was a ghostwriter, because I don't think a soldier would explain something that way or use that vernacular wordage, And then you'd read some that was, I'm not saying Bravo 20, but you read, and actually Andy McNabb did a good job. It sounded like a soldier would say that. So at a certain point in time, I was like, maybe it's on me. I was fortunate to hit the GCP, which is kind of the tip of the spear for a legionnaire in that system. There's that historical coincidences. The fact that I learned that, and I learned in my research and just in time talking to my family, that I had a lot of French connections. And that kind of led to the two books that followed. So anyway, I did what I could. I had some friends kind of fucking go through it, because you lose your memories, and they might have some memories. Then I hired a lady, and she was an editor, and we worked on it for a year and a half. And the deal with her was we can't change the way I say something. We'll make it grammatically correct and not a run-on sentence, and the spelling will be right. But you can say, hey, you got to tell me. You can't write a book as a sociopath, right? You got to tell me a little bit more about yourself, Joel. For the reader.
I would probably read a book written by a sociopath.
You know what I mean? But you got to
tell me more about this book.
You got to, exactly. Well, Appel, I'm trying that. Anyway, so we did that, and spent a year and a half, and then I was lucky. I knew nothing about fucking writing, about publishing. One of my dad's friends from the 104 days was working at the Canadian Military College, and he had written a book on the fighter pilots during the Second War, and he said, hey, my dad had mentioned to him that I was working. He said to my dad, ask Joel if I can read it. So I sent him a copy. Say, hey, Joel, I think you got something here. If you're interested, I'll show it to my publisher. And I was like, fuck yeah, man, I don't know what to do next, right? Yeah. And it wasn't typically the type of stuff that they would publish, but they put me on to Wilfrid Laurier, and they took it on, and they took it for a year, and they do the editing. They didn't change anything at all, actually, but they just make sure that everything's done right, like the rank structure's done, dates and everything. And they came up with the name, actually, the title, and then the cover page.
What does the title mean?
Appel. So that's a roll call.
Okay.
So every morning in the Legion, the whistle goes off, and you count out, and they're looking for deserters, right? They want the effective. So it's kind of a double play on the word. It's Appel, but it's also I'm showing a factual story of the county. If you're interested in the Legion, well, here's a shout out. Maybe it's for you. But so they published it, and result. And then the Jocko thing. One of my engineers actually was heli skiing.
You mean mechanic, right? Aircraft engineer?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, we call them mechanics.
Yeah,
I'm like, what, was he up there with a slide rule doing math, or what are we talking?
Yeah. He was a fan of Jocko. I didn't. Yeah. And he said, hey, you should send your book to. I was like, what? So anyway, I did. Hail Mary. And then in the mail, there was a nice little card a couple months later saying, hey, we come down. And that led to, me learning about, running, to your side of stuff and that whole kind of, side of the book world and the ex-military stuff. Anyway, so that's that. And then the feedback was, pretty good. I mean, it's not, I haven't had anybody come back say bullshit. I don't think they can because that was taken care of in my efforts. I've had a lot of Americans, young men, reach out saying, hey, I can't, more so soon after the podcast. But I would give them respect. And a lot of them, it was on Instagram back at the time. I deleted that one a long time ago. But I would typically say, hey, listen, if you're interested in, fuck yeah, just be careful. It's not necessarily what we think. If you think you're jumping into an African country and saving gold mines and, it's not that. It's, and then learn some fucking French before you go. It's a huge, huge difference. Enjoy running and just be prepared for fucking shit. It's not fun.
It's tough.
And then the big one was typically guys don't ask questions about, they just say, I'm going. And they deal with it, but in this day and age, the Legion has a website.
Yeah.
It's pretty intuitive and they will answer questions. It takes them a bit of time, but they've come a long way too. They have their social media side of stuff.
Did you ever think you'd see a day when the French Foreign Legion has social media
or Twitter or whatever? I know, They've come
but you got to play on the chessboard that presents itself to you.
But they really when I went and I actually sat with the officer that was in charge of recruiting, and they were new to that kind of side of the world, and they really do push a narrative where it's a second chance, and it kind of bugs me because I wasn't there for a second chance. I was there for a first chance, and I like the fact of knowing that the guys beside me and the guys in the GCB were all. I don't think any of them there were for a second chance. A handful of them were. Ex-French para, and they were like, fuck, I want to join, the rep. That's the guy you want beside you, not the second chance. But I thought also, why are you trying to attract, not fuck ups, but second chance to say, hey, if your country, and that was my point of it, if your country unfortunately won't give you the opportunity to soldier and you're interested in soldiering, we will. It might be a different way of doing it, but you have, I thought that would work, but they can do what they want to do. But, yeah, it's just so my answer always with the guys is, hey, just be careful what you wish for. I actually had a young Navy officer. He had come out of the academy, and I think obviously you could tell me wrong, but I think before they send them to the SEALs program, they do like a pre-course to vet. Does that ring a bell?
Not incredible. Well. Yeah. I can tell you what I've heard, but I've never gone through the program, and it shifts, of course, over time. Yeah. My understanding at the academy is that there are always more people who want to go to BUDS than slots available. So it's very competitive, and I do believe, I think they call it plebes summer, and I think more than once they will go through like a micro BUDS or a mini BUDS.
Gotcha.
That does happen in there somewhere.
So that sounds correct.
Tracks.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what it looks like, but that tracks.
I think he was a rugby player. Anyway, he got injured, I think, first phase. Is that first phase?
First phase would be actual BUDS itself.
Yeah.
Okay, so it was probably in training at that point.
Yeah. And then, so he injured himself, obviously recovered, came back, and then in the diving phase where he said he got through quite a bit and they were doing dive training, whatever, and he had an incident where something happened and blood work was done and they noted elevated level of testosterone, and he admitted to taking TRT at the time. Gone. Yeah, so he was out. So he reached out. He's actually the only guy I talked to on the phone. Not that I wouldn't, but I was like, dude, I feel for you. That sucks. And he said, listen, I'm young, I'm keen, I want to fight. And then this is when the Ukraine was kicking off. He said, I'm considering going over there. I was like, oh, fuck, man. It's not my place to say anyway. Do you really want to put your ass on the line for that's a whole other. But I said, listen, the Legion, sure. And then he kind of had some questions about the lifestyle. And I was like, honestly, dude, I think if you're asking about those kind of questions, you're in the wrong place because you don't have a life for a long time, But again, back to the old point, it's like here you got a young, keen guy. Like, fuck, come on, man. But whatever, it's
also,
not my. It's
we
not
should
my
probably
system.
reclassify his elevated testosterone. As a young man, he was doing what's called steroids.
Yes. Yeah.
He was on the non-therapeutic doses of TRT.
Yes. Yeah.
Which this is a subject that comes up often. Maybe there were people who were on that when I went through. I was a scrawny 155 pound kid, terrified of needles. Wouldn't have been my jam anyway. But I can tell you, having been as a student and an instructor, I don't think it would help you.
Yeah, fair.
I really don't. Especially if you're adding body mass, man, that is the exact opposite of what you need in that program.
I think you mentioned that those to help him recover, but whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, but
I didn't spend too much time. But
you know what can help you recover? Fucking manage your time well. Rest when you can and focus on your nutrition. Because it's people think that SEAL training is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You have Monday through Friday, weekends off, except for Hell Week. Like you can make it through.
Yeah. No,
also, why destroy your body up front? All of the choices have consequences. You make those choices early, you might have long-term consequences you can't work your way out of.
So yeah, those kind of died up. But a couple of guys actually got in. One of the guys, I think I sent Jocko a picture. One of the guys got to the rep, and he said, I'd listened to the Jocko episode, and he's now at the rep. I sent that to Jocko, and I said, that's pretty fucking cool. I mean,
that is cool.
You're doing your part. But whatever. If anything, my only thing is if people are thinking about it, just be careful. It's not necessarily it's an option, but it's not a fun one for a while.
I say the same thing about the U.S. military, specifically the SEAL community. It's amazing, but it comes at a cost.
Yeah.
And it's certainly not like playing Call of Duty. If you think you're going to hop off some swivel chair like we're sitting in right now and just jump through the screen.
And the language thing is huge.
Yeah.
It's different food. You're not going home for Christmas. You don't have the girlfriend thing is tough. I mean, you're locked down for a while. So you just got to mentally, you got to just push through it and get her done. But it is what it is. I have no regrets. Would I want my son who you met to? That's not something I wish on anyone, to be honest with you.
What would you say if he said, "I want to"? What would you do?
Yeah, no,
it's a tough one because
he's smart. He wouldn't. But if he did,
thank God none of my children have. Because here's the deal: my dad was the son of a World War II military member, Navy side, and actually kind of his whole family. My mom, Army as well, Nurse Corps for my grandmother, I want to say administrative for my grandfather. But both of those experiences were not really net positive. A lot of alcohol use on my mom's side and a lot of post-traumatic stress on my dad's. But, and then my dad went to Vietnam.
Yeah, I enjoy your dad's episodes. He's quite the man.
God, Michael, can you make sure we cut that, what he just said out? Do you understand?
Shout out to
do you understand the animal that I've created?
Yeah.
Somebody made the mistake of telling him that I should make shirts with just his face and beard. Let me tell you how many times I've heard about that.
I'll buy one.
Let me know when it's... damn it. Now what he does is he tells my sister to pitch me those ideas. Hey, don't you think it'd be a good idea if Andy... Because he knows I will fucking jump down his throat.
Yeah.
I actually don't even jump down his throat. I just look at him. I go, no. Yeah. I've created a fucking monster.
That's funny.
He's Santa Claus in December. He loves that. I made sure the shoes are too tight, so he's lost toenails both years. Like I get my digs in when I can.
Fair one.
But I was really young, but you want to talk about working through some physical and mental consequences of war.
Yeah.
My mom basically said to him, again, paraphrasing, you either work your shit out or I'm taking the kids and you'll never see them again.
Yeah,
and so we actually moved. Yeah, we moved to Missoula and I was way too young to understand what was going on. But I do have memories of my dad, like in tidy whities in the backyard in snow, barefoot, screaming. Yeah. I remember a door that he had punched it. I didn't see that, but there was still blood on it. I had no recollection of what that meant. Yeah. And then imagine that man have a son at 11 goes, hey, not only do I want to join, but I want to be a SEAL.
Yeah, exactly.
Not a single time did he or my mom ever try to talk me out.
Really? Interesting. Yeah.
Not once.
Yeah.
They certainly asked.
Did they know it was pointless? Just based on knowing you as a...
Oh, that's a good question. That is actually probably why. My dad would. My dad says I'm intense. I'm like, I'm the most normal person I know. I don't feel like I'm intense. Yeah. It certainly was what I wanted to do, but they asked questions. Why questions? Why do you want to do this? Have you thought about this? But goddamn, not a single time.
Yeah. Fair.
Which thankfully none of my kids have wanted to join the military, but I would have had to pay forward what my parents did for me. That's why I asked, what do you think you would do if your son? It's like, Dad, the Legion is actually for me.
Yeah. Well, I know.
At least you could prep him with information.
They watched Das Boot at a age that's way too young to be watching Das Boot. We still talk about it. I traumatized him trying to get him to watch Band of Brothers with me when he's like, Dad, this is boring. I was like, what are you fucking talking about?
Yeah, this is trench warfare. This is not boring.
Yeah. Anyway, he's more. He's just actually applied to an aviation program.
Oh, nice. Fixed or rotary?
Fixed wing. Oh yeah, I wouldn't.
Fixed.
You might as well go lifestyle, right? He's
lifestyle.
Yeah, he's got the solid girlfriend.
It is hilarious to me how fixed wing people talk shit on rotary and rotary talk.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. No. And they are so different, right?
Yeah.
It's a different type of person too that gets into the, yeah.
What does that mean? I'm fluid? I'm just back and forth.
You're bi.
I'm like a French door. I'm swinging both directions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but I think, have you noticed that, like, from your experience in the fixed wing to the rotary, like it seems like a different type of person.
To be honest, outside of the schoolhouse and the few people that I've worked and trained with, I've never been around the pilots in a commercial setting. Like I've never sat down with a group of firefighter pilots all together and listened to them and interact or ski. Or, you know what I mean? Like I just haven't had that experience.
Yeah, fair one.
There's kind of a lifestyle vibe, I guess, on the fixed wing. You're rolling around in your uniform, big suitcase. Yeah. I saw that a lot when I was flying jets.
Yeah. And you're a lot more involved on the helicopter side stuff. I mean, those landings. I mean, there's a lot more decision making.
Yeah.
Short bursts of
fear.
Yes. Took the words out
gripping
of my mouth.
terror.
Exactly. Am I doing the right thing? But yeah, he's going that route. So I didn't even come up. But
what do you think you would have done though?
I mean, at the end of the day, I would respect his choice. I would, that's a good question. I actually don't have a good answer for you. I think
it'd be a tough one.
It would be.
Toiled with it as a parent as well.
Yeah. Now that being said, if he did, he went over. I know he's being looked after. It's not a shit show, man. It's a legit, well-oiled machine. It's been done the same way for a long time because it's effective.
My hesitation was always around, especially if they wanted to follow my path. There's one thing for me personally, suffering and going through pain.
Yeah.
But having, again, been through there as a student and an instructor, I would struggle as a parent knowing that they were going through that much suffering and pain. That would be the hardest part for me.
Or if you got that letter or email saying I'm in hell, be like, fuck, it's too late. You're in, and you can't do anything about it. Yeah, it would be heartbreaking. Right? Yeah. No, luckily, I don't have to worry about that. And my daughter, it's not going to happen for her. I mean, she can't join the Legion as a
Legion is male only.
Oh, yeah.
What a bunch of chauvinist pigs.
I know. I did
sexist even.
It is. Here's a story. I'm not sure if I should share this, but I don't have to mention the name. But there was
any story that starts with that, you immediately better tell me the story.
After the Jocko podcast, there was this marketing company that had a podcast, and they definitely lean left. I looked at their website, and they supported the Biden Foundation, all that kind of stuff. But whatever, I'm not. But they said they'd seen the episode. Would they be interested in doing their podcast? But it was virtual, whatever. So I had to do a pre-screening, and it was these 4 nice ladies, and I think they were just vetting me, and they were kind of asking some questions and trying to get a feel of how it would go. And then the day of the podcast came, and it was the CEO and the CFO, a male and a female, and I think they were probably in their early 60s, and I could tell from the get-go that he wasn't really aware of what the book was, and some of the questions were like, I guess just tell this is not a Jocko podcast by any means,
not well researched.
But the subject came up about it's only males in the Legion, and she said why, and I hadn't prepared my answer for that, and I said that's a good question. I paused, and I said not that a female couldn't, but I said the Legion is very old school. It would take a lot to change things so that women could be introduced. I mean, all the obvious things we don't watch it. And I said, that being said, if you got sent over with a combat company from the rep into Central Africa for 4 months with some Polacks, Czechs, Russians, it wouldn't go well. And I said, if you get my drift. And her facial expression was like she could tell what I was trying to get through. Like that poor lady would, you don't have to say it, right?
Which is the truth.
Yeah. And that they never aired it. They never aired. Yeah. And I think that was,
fuck yeah.
That was why. Yeah. So I don't have that. I never thought of it, but I think to answer your question, it's just there's no need. So why? And that, that's not
that's a tough pill for some people to swallow, and I'm totally comfortable with that because in my experience, the people that have the most difficult time swallowing that pill are the ones who are never going to be put into that position in the first place. Yep. So it's an academic exercise, and feel free to toil with those for the rest of your life.
And I know you guys are dealing with that right now in your Senate hearings for Hegseth, right? That's kind of something that he's brought up, and
Yeah.
they're kind of all over that.
I mean, they opened SEAL training up to women,
Yeah.
and there have been some people who have attempted the entry into the pipeline.
Yeah.
There might have been somebody who made it to the first day, but not even remotely close to completion.
I think the Israelis did some pretty in-depth research into it. And
guess what it found? Guys and girls, when they're in close proximity, do guys and girls shit.
Yeah. But also how it affects a small unit team if she's injured. It can ruin the dynamic.
It takes I don't want to say combat effectiveness, but it will take the attention away because we are ingrained at a genetic level to try to assist in that situation, which, I mean...
Yeah, makes sense.
Again, the people who struggle with it the deepest are the ones who are not going to live in that environment, so I'm okay with them spinning out into orbit to try to figure that out for themselves.
Women are a lot better than us males at a lot of things, so it's not a sexist thing by any means. It's just it's a time and place and yeah. Before I forget, when you went over to Iraq and you were attached to the CAG there too.
Yeah.
What was that? Were you the only SEAL?
No. So we sent an entire team.
Okay.
And so for two teams, 2 fire teams would make up a team, 2 teams would make up a troop, just to give you an idea of the structure. There was a time, and again, this is me looking in the rearview, about 20 years almost at this point, so people can forgive me if I don't get the specific details.
I get it, yeah.
There was a time, I think it was around 2003, 2004, where somebody made the decision that let's let development group focus on Afghanistan and let's let CAG focus on Iraq, which at a, again, academic level could make sense unless for whatever reason you needed to cross-pollinate in some way. Yeah. So I think at the tactical level, like at the command level itself, the decision was made that they were going to at least start cross-training and then actually start cross-deploying. So they sent our squadron a team, we sent a squadron or a team to their squadron.
Okay.
And dude, at the tactical level, they're such awesome people. Yeah. I have listened. One of the things that bothers me about the veteran culture, specifically inside of special operations, there is a large segment that has they want to degrade, they want to tear down, they want to, literally titles of YouTube videos, are the SEALs the most useless special operations force? SEALs versus Ranger, Delta, and there's videos where Delta guys saying, SEALs suck and this, that, the other. And my response to all that is whatever, man. You're entitled to your opinion. What people are never going to get me to do is talk shit about CAG. Yeah. Some of those guys were awesome. Some of those guys were less awesome. And I don't mean at a tactical level. I mean just not all personalities jive. I still talk to some of the guys that I was on the deployment with. They were fucking fantastic operators. They were just the same guys as us. They wore a different uniform.
Yeah. Tactically similar? Like was there...
Incredibly similar. There were some differences.
Because that's early days where you guys are learning your trade.
Yeah.
Somewhat?
There was...
That would have been 2000...
I went to play with them in 2005.
Okay, so you've been doing it for a couple of years.
Yeah, but the tactics shift over time too as your enemy evolves. But there were some differences in how they cleared internal structures. But honestly, there's only so many ways to shave a cat, right? Yeah. And I thought they were fantastic. Yeah. So I'm going to leave it to everybody else that wants to sit there and make YouTube snappy videos. My response is always they're fucking fantastic. Yeah. They're spectacular operators. And like I said, I'm still friends with some of the people I deployed with. Cool. So
neat. No, I mean, you got to be proud of your past. I mean, it's pretty neat, man.
It's I have moments now where I was doing a podcast with Evan for Black Rifle, and we were talking about injuries. I forgot that I got shot.
I remember that. I saw that clip.
I legitimately,
he asked you what you're, and you're like, and he was like, you got shot, didn't you? Yeah,
which funny. I clearly did, and it definitely sucked in the moment, but. I mean, I'm past it now. I've been out of the military I got out in 2013, so I'm coming up on 12 years. Yeah. There'll be a point where I've been out longer than I was in. Yeah. And I don't think about it much. I will be the first to admit it formed me into the person that I am, which has allowed me to do the things that I've done. Fair enough. But, I mean, I don't have a single ribbon or medal. I don't think I own a trident anymore. I think I found my uniforms only because they were in one of the boxes that I got sent to me from my ex-wife. I mean, I'm proud of it, but it sits on a bookshelf somewhere. Yeah.
Did someone say you were writing? You writing a book?
I did write a book.
You did?
I did write a book.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And how'd you find that?
I got fucking tricked into it by Mike Glover. Yeah. Have I talked about this, Michael?
Well, you've mentioned it, but not.
Mentioned it. I don't think you've told the full story.
So what's the objective?
Strap in, Mike, you
of the book,
bastard. The objective of the book, if I were to describe it, would be the experiences and mistakes of my own life, hopefully impart it in a way that can help shorten the learning curve for other people.
Okay. Yeah.
So it is through the lens of what I used to do for a living, but it's not. There's zero war stories in it.
Yeah.
My valorous combat story is telling the story of getting shot and laying flat on my back. But like, sweet, there it was, people. Sorry, not a Hollywood movie with smoke and shit going off.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've made some galactic mistakes in my life, and I was exposed to some really interesting situations. And the job can be really challenging. And there's some things they teach you along the way that have such broad applicability in the outside world. And if you wrap your head around those concepts, it can. Not a guarantee, but it can allow you to do things that people start scratching their head. Like, how the fuck does this person do this? They're not hard, but they have to be taught. But
how long did that take you to write?
Well, so Mike Glover hits me up. He goes, "Hey, let's write a book together." And I said, "No, that sounds gay." So he kept at it. I think those were my exact words. He kept at it. He's like, "Listen, we'll each only write half. And what we can do is we could look at like leaderships or lessons learned, and we'll pick a topic. I'll write a section from my side, and then you write a section from your side. So it could be two different people, almost like having a conversation. We could italicize one or whatever, so you could know whose language it is."
Yep.
So we set a date that we were going to have our sections done. We got to that date. Only one of us had actually written anything.
You?
And, yes. And it was actually really easy to write. I found it to be an enjoyable process.
Did it take you back?
Not really.
No.
I guess, maybe in some respects, what it has taken me back to is I am in awe of how fucking stupid I was when I was younger and how I am so fortunate
To be alive still.
My God. And have not killed anybody that I worked with by accident. I look back at the young man that I have been in so many times in my life, and it's like, why did you do that?
No.
Why did you make that choice?
Was there any struggle in being honest?
No.
Because you can easily change an area where I'm embarrassed about my...
Nope. The first story in the book is how I lost my trident the first time.
Okay.
And I have been, one of my guiding principles, and I do my best on this, is with guests or with anything on the podcast, I just tell the truth.
Yeah.
It's shocking how much easier it is to keep track of shit when you just tell the truth.
Called out, yeah.
And I've probably failed more times than I've succeeded in my life. Yeah. And I don't have any issue talking about that because I'm just a human being. Yeah. It's a weird relationship having a podcast. People know more about you than you know about them. Yeah. But they also, and this is a mistake people make, for anybody that you have a relationship like that with, meaning you don't really know them, but you have a connection to them in any way, shape, or form, don't forget that they're just human at the end of the day. Yeah. I think it's essential to maintain your humanity and be honest about your mistakes. So it was an interesting journey of just kind of looking back at my own errors. But I had about 30,000 words, I think. And we had found somebody who was going to craft the pitch. There's people that you can give the information to and they'll craft it. And I was talking to the guy and I'm like, well, I guess this was a waste of time, man. Sorry. And he goes, hey, well, just send me what you have. I'm like, fuck it, I already wrote it. So I did. I sent it to him. Yeah. And he got back to me. He's like, hey, man, there might be something here. So can I put this into it? And we already paid him. Yeah. And Mike paid for half of it. So just so you know, Mike, you paid for half of my pitch. It's a couple $1,000. It wasn't crazy. Yeah. Let him do it. And with that, there was a book agent associated with that. And the pitch went to the agent went to the publishers. And there was actually a good amount of interest. So I, had to obviously finish writing and then forward and some blurbs and stuff like that. But I think the final draft will be slap the table, sent off February 1. So we're about 2 weeks away. And then it'll come out in January of 2026.
Audiobook?
I remember.
That's hard, man.
I remember somewhere in the contract there was a mention of an audiobook. I'm going to need to go back and review that because honestly, if there is going to be one, I can do that right here. And I would rather be the one to at least give it a shot. Yeah. So unless James Earl Jones would agree to do so because Darth Vader. Yeah. I mean, or Harrison Ford. True. So those two would be the only acceptable alternatives.
Yeah. No, neat. That's And then you got the perfect platform. That's where I mean, if you're going to write a book, you got to market it. That's where I struggled.
I am not
you know.
going to be great at that part either.
Well, I mean, you got the platform.
I mean,
right
well,
here.
the thing is, I can
That's-
talk about it. I have no problem talking about it casually. I'm going to have a real hard time if you have to like pedal on the gas, marketing and everything. You know what I mean? Like, I'll struggle with that.
Yeah.
I can talk about why I wanted to do it, what the book is, and what I hope from it. But
That's
you know.
I hear you. That's something I wasn't prepared for and didn't really realize. But you know, with a publisher, it's all on the author to get
for
out there and then I struggled with that for sure. It's not something I think it depends on the individual too. I mean, if you're comfortable with certain things, but if you're putting yourself out there, sometimes like, I'm more introvert than the opposite. So I delete shit all the fucking time, you know, just for that. Like, I'll post something and I'm like, delete. Don't want it out there.
Yeah, but that's the beauty of that delete button.
Yeah.
Many people have forgotten that that's there.
Yeah.
Many people also forget that it's optional. The amount of outrage that I've seen that originated on social media is unbelievable. People forget it's optional to actually click on the app to participate in that.
No, fair one, yeah. Yeah. I don't get sucked into the...
Yeah, I do sometimes.
Yeah,
sometimes
fair.
I get on some heated shit on X.
Yeah. I'm not... no, it's cool. Good for you. I mean, it's certainly been something that's been a different experience doing it. I did like Appel. They did the pod or the audiobook, and they reached out and said, "Hey, we're going to do the audiobook." And I said, "Okay, you know, typically in that genre, they like to hear the author, you know. But if you don't, you know, just if you could use it anyway." They use a professional, and he did a good job. He reached out, and you know, there's some things, but whatever, nothing's perfect. But when I wrote the second one, we did it on our own terms. And we had budgeted a certain amount of money. I reached out to a studio and I said, listen, 60,000 words. And they were like, typically I'll take this long and it costs this much. And I went in and I fucking busted the budget out because you mumble, you don't say it properly, you stutter. And I think we have to sell a million books audiobooks to pay for it. It's not easy. Yeah, that's why they. Well, I'm being facetious. It's not a million, but that's why they use a professional a lot of times because they roll in. They just knock it out of the park. But
What do you got planned for the rest of your life, man? You got any goals hanging out in front of you that you can see?
Yeah, I could see myself fighting fire till I'm 65. All going well. We have to do.
Is that like a hard stop age?
I think at that point you don't want to be rolling barrels or you know, working like that. You got to in Canada. You have to. Actually, the machines in Australia are N registered, so it's every year. But in Canada, for your license over 40, it's every 6 months your medical. So as long as you keep your medical, 65 would be a nice number. I seriously see myself finding a nice old farmhouse in northern France and fixing that up, and the barn too, and then the kids have a place to stay when they come visit.
I like it.
Some nice red wine, cheese, and baguettes, and just chill out. My lady friend's a French speaker. Croissant, pain chocolat, a little cognac. But yeah, I think I could, you know, fix it up, get some help, but you know, keep yourself busy.
Yeah. Can you imagine a more beautiful place to retire? I mean, fuck.
Yeah. And then, we'll see. Nothing ever pans out the way you plan, does it? But
but at least, I mean, at least with a plan, you can orient in a general direction. You might end up doing a J turn, but at least you have.
I do have a realtor looking, you know, Normandy area. Oh yeah, that's.
Normandy was amazing.
Yeah, fuck.
For the
I'm
80th.
jealous. The DC3.
Dude, we went out.
I got a story.
It was the same static line that was used on D-Day.
Neat.
So I will be honest. I visually inspected the living shit out of that.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
What a cool jump.
And that was the 80th, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Neat.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, good for you guys. Jumping on the DC3 would be. They use them for their smoke jumpers.
I can see why.
In fact,
it's a cool platform.
That's where a couple years ago I was up in Fort Nelson. DC3 comes in. The jumpers get out.
Is Fort Nelson anywhere near Nelson, BC?
No.
Okay.
No, it's northern BC. It's halfway up the Alaska Highway. So
Gotcha.
you're going up. So I go over and I know one of the jumpers. Hey, Joel, you want to look inside? So we go inside, and he's showing me the door and the cable and stuff. And I look out on the tarmac, and there's this guy looking into space with like the weight of the world on his shoulders. And I say to Axel, the guy I know, I was like, "Fuck, man, your teammate is a spitting image of David Goggins." And he laughs and he's like, "Well, it's because it's him." I was like, "What? Fuck off." And he's like, "Yeah, it's." So he said, "Do you want to meet him?" I said, "Sure, if that doesn't bug him, whatever." So we went over and met David Goggins. I was like, "Dude, what the fuck you doing here?" You know?
Yeah, what was he doing there?
He just said he likes, you know. I think he used to smoke jump in Florida.
Do they even have smoke jumpers in Florida?
I believe so. They used to. They do in Boise because they're the ones that came up 2 years ago.
Static line jumping anywhere. There's fucking alligators or crocodiles.
Fair one, yeah. But anyway, so I was
You get a bad spot on that one, and you can watch.
Yeah.
Can you imagine coming down under a goddamn static line canopy that has the controllability of this fucking bottle of water?
Exactly.
And you're over a swamp, and you see like.
No,
do you
agree,
discharge your pistol in your mouth before you get to the ground, or do you try to
Yeah,
fire?
I hear it. Yeah. But it was short and sweet. I just said, "Hey man, appreciate you guys coming up about why." And he said, "Oh, I just like the low key side of it, And I think his knees are fucked, so he hasn't been back. But
Might have something to do with running hundreds of
yeah,
miles.
I no
a week.
doubt, right?
Yeah, I'm
And,
not a doctor.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it's a neat job. Those guys do a neat job, and as I said, Black Rifle sent them because the smoke jumpers from Boise came up, and. We used to stay in the same hotel, and we'd be drinking shit 7-Eleven coffee. And I reached out and
No Timmy's?
No, there's not in. It was in Mackenzie.
Okay.
There might have been, but honestly, Timmy's is fucking just as bad.
Timmy's is the Canadian Starbucks.
Yeah. So I emailed Evan. I said, if you're willing, sir, because we were busy and we're drinking shit coffee, would Black Rifle send up a couple $100 worth of coffee?
He
And
probably sent you a pallet.
I'll pay, And anyway, he responded with his, one of his colleagues attached saying action, And then I got a PO invoice, whatever, and there was like $2,500 worth of coffee, tumblers, and I was like, oh. But then it said owing $0,
Yeah.
And it showed up, and the guys fucking appreciate it. So shout out to Black Rifle and I went for that. It was
They get
much
a lot of
appreciated.
shit, and people have no idea what they do behind the scenes. The stuff that never hits social media, they'll never know about.
Yeah.
And then I've just kind of given up arguing with people on that. Where can people find your book? Where can they get a hold of you?
So the book, legionengineer.com is the website. They're all there, but they're all on Amazon.
Okay.
Audible, whatever. I'm on Instagram. That's really my only social media. Joel Struthers. That's about it, man.
What do you want to leave people with? What do you want to close it out with?
Appreciate the opportunity. Honestly,
of course.
it's
Thank you for reaching
hopefully
out.
it wasn't too frustrating. As I said, I think this is kind of the end. I've written the 3 books. They're all mostly family history, military history. The last 2 are about, guys out there, people that have done some things that I find super, super humbling and respectful. And that's the end of my writing project.
For now.
No,
you
I
never
think
know.
you
never know.
No, it's fine. It's good to stay focused on certain things. And yeah, I've hit the limit. There's, as I said, I think this would be my 3rd kind of sit down podcast with 3 books. This is nice. I appreciate your platform. I like your style of, I wouldn't do this if it was all up to me to have the conversation because it would be pretty quiet. I like the guests you have. And I think it's cool that you gave an opportunity to a legionnaire because hopefully we answered our former legionnaire, some questions. And if people do have questions, then by all means they could ask. But as I said, there's a website that has more up to date, my experiences is period. And if you dig the books and you appreciate them, let me know. That's about it.
Cool. Let's get you back to your son, man.
Thank you.
Thank you for the bottle of wine again.
Oh, you bet. Enjoy it. It's a
Share
good one.
that with my wife, who,
Yes.
again, walks at the pace of your marching.
Yeah.
I understand where she gets it from now. I'm going to have to ask her if she's French in any way because
Yeah.
I've never seen anybody else walk at that pace. Fortunately, she doesn't listen, so she'll never know until Michael tells her that fucking turncoat.
We done?
We're done.
Fuck yeah.
Done.
I fucking hate that shit.